multiple of you, if I'm not mistaken.
Huh?
And we have our things down here, and let's get a move on. Let's just go skip the bullshit. Let's go straight to the tier lists. But let's describe, the criteria first, of course. So we're kind of going by the Near Eastern sort of way of ranking rulers. Rulers kind of came in different categories. So there was the Great King, the really big guys, the kings who are way at the top and they talk to each other like brothers. And then there's the kings who are kind of below them and the vassals. And these guys would send their diplomatic messages to the great kings and saying, Father, my lord, my son. It's a politeness thing and it's deferential. Everything is familial, even if it's not, but sometimes it is. And then we have the mayors. So some mayors have like a strong independent policy, and some of them are just absolute pushovers. So we're going to rank them on this tier list. We're not using letters so much. Ugh. And our first one up on the mic is Ahiawa. To give a little summary of the kingdom of Ahiawa, it's really kind of a Greek or a Mycenaean Greek settlement based around the city of Miletus in southwestern Anatolia, and it also combines local Luwian elements. And they were known for their pirates, and they were also known for kind of like raiding a lot of other coastal settlements in Anatolia, like Troy, which may have been the basis of the Trojan War, as we get from the Iliad. So let's think where we gotta put these Ahiawans.
Well, before we go into that, I do think it's important to mention that one of the theories is that the Ahiawa were one of the sea peoples.
Yeah, I've heard that they were the Ekwesh of the sea peoples specifically. Is that right, or?
I forget if that was the tribe that I heard. I wouldn't be surprised though.
As for the ranking, I'll make an argument that they should be put in lesser king status. They weren't really a vassal of anyone, and while they were referred to as a great king in some of the correspondence, I don't really think a good case could be made for them really being equal to the likes of the Hittites or the Egyptians.
I'm sure their mothers called them great kings plenty.
But what do you think?
Honestly, I mean, I think we have to look at their grand impact. Like, what legacy do they leave behind?
Well, if they have a pretty significant legacy, given that the foundation of Western literature is based on their mythologized achievements. And we do know from Hittite sources that there was, something like a Trojan War when Ahiawan Greeks tried to take over the kingdom of Volusia, or what we refer to now as Troy or Ilium, which was more loyal to the Hittites. And we also know that the Ahiawans battled against the king of the Hittites, ended up being defeated by Mershali II, but only because the gods intervened by sending a meteor to hit their king.
Did they worship that meteor afterwards?
They did, and the meteor was still mentioned in classical times, and they kept it in Ephesus. So this is sort of interesting, corroboration of these ancient accounts.
So, I mean, I think another thing would also to just be, look at their architecture. What do they leave behind, like in this very physical sense? And I mean, a lot of this obviously was probably, built over by a lot of the city, the ruins that we have now. You have a lot of construction that I wouldn't be surprised. Probably a lot of it was Roman era, but I mean, it's fascinating. Like, what is this? Wait, I just saw it. The Great Harbor Monument at Lion Bay, and like I wonder. I mean, you have this city that it's not that far from the sea, but I honestly I don't know enough about the architecture around here. But you definitely see they have easy access to the Aegean,
Hmm.
and especially with the whole theory of potentially being the Equesh, then you end up with them sailing east, and I mean, I don't know specifically where they landed because so much of it, a lot of the records, it's not specific like, oh, this group was in this area and this group was in this area. It was more so you have the kings who write about battling them, and so it's like, okay, well, they're clearly in this area more or less, but I mean, honestly, I think probably for the different tiers, what were there again?
There's great king, lesser king, vassal king, strong mayor, and weak mayor.
I'd maybe say like a wait, what was the third one you said?
Vassal king.
Yeah, maybe a vassal king.
Really? So who are they vassals of?
Uh shoot.
Maybe they're vassals of the king of Mycenae.
It's possible. Yeah. Or also if you view them as like again, with the theory that they potentially were that Equesh, then it's not necessarily that they're vassals to any one person in particular so much as they're kind of vassals to whoever, is leading them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I could see that argument. I lean at least towards lesser king because they are called like a great king in the sources, but I think it's a stretch, you know. But they're
Yeah.
strong. They are low key. They have a really great army, and they have these Mycenaean innovations in their armor. They have this heavy Dendra style armor that was difficult for even the Hittites, who were the strongest power of their time to deal with. I don't know. It's hard to say, but that's later on. That's in the 1200s. We're talking about the 1300s. I don't know. Let's. I wish we could get a second opinion. Does anyone in the chat have an opinion whether it should be lesser king or vassal king? I'll just keep it here in the middle for now
Yeah, that could
until
always
we have a conclusion. Okay. Well. Okay. Next we have Alashia. To give some historical background, this is the ancient name for Cyprus. And they had a king who was quite respected, though he's not mentioned by name in the Amarna letters. But they're known for their copper, but they also had to deal with a lot of pirates. So they had a lot of wealth because they are number one in we are number one in copper. Ea Nasir will weep. Oh, poor Ea Nasir. He couldn't get the right copper. Where do you think they should sit? Ahyawa. I'm not Ahyawa. Alashia.
So I mean, I guess it depends. I'd maybe say they're kind of on a similar level there because while I'd say maybe lesser king because of the fact that they were this great source of bronze and able to basically sustain themselves for in ways that other places couldn't. I might be wrong, but weren't they were vassals to the Hittites, right?
Yeah, at a certain point, they were vassals to the Hittites, but I'm not sure if they were vassals to the Hittites in the 1300s. I think in the 1400s and the 1500s, the Hittites sent a fleet to Alashia, but in the 1300s, we see like a contraction of the Hittites, and they have to kind of push back to where they were before they went into Syria specifically, rather than trying to attack the Mediterranean ports, of Alashia. And at that time, Alashia, I think they had an independent foreign policy towards Egypt. So I'm leaning towards lesser king. They're not a vassal at this particular time.
Oh my god. So I just looked up, and given this is from AI, so it's entirely possible no one's seriously arguing this, and the AI just hallucinated it. But I typed in Alashia etymology, and it highlights some scholars believe that the name may be the origin of the late. Oh, Okay, I misread that. I read it backwards. I thought it was saying that that Alicia was what gave rise to Elisha. I'm like, oh come on, that doesn't make sense. But I don't know. It'd be interesting. Is Alicia maybe connected to Elisha in some way?
She is absolutely connected to Cyprus because after she flees from the Phoenician homeland in Tyre, where is the first place she goes? She goes to Cyprus in Kition, and she picks up a bunch of temple prostitutes for her men.
Oh, I was actually referring to Alicia,
Oh,
the
Elisha, the biblical prophet Elisha, Baldy.
yeah, yeah.
It could very well be from the same root.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm not seeing anything that actually, suggests it. It's just something that the AI probably hallucinate. But okay, this sounds interesting. Alasia, the name of the Cypriot capital city and kingdom, Akkadian Uru Alashia, also Kur Uru Alashia, uh, and that it has long been considered of Hurrian derivation um, from the noun stem alai, lady or queen, with two toponymic suffixes shia.
I wouldn't be surprised by that, and it would be very typical given what we know about other Amarna era female rulers for it to not give the name of their ruler if it's a woman. We have another ruler who was unambiguously a woman. They were called her the Lady of the Lions, but that wasn't her name. There was no mention of her actual name. It could very well plausibly be that the ruler of Alashia was female and therefore was not mentioned by name in the Amarna letters. Another thing about Alashia that I think is interesting is that it's quite diverse. You have obviously Canaanite communities, but also Luwians, Hurrians, as you mentioned, and Greeks, Achaean Greeks from, and this diverse melting pot of cultures kind of creates Cyprus as we know it, which I think is really cool. And we haven't deciphered their language yet. We don't know how to read Cypriot, Etio-Cypriot. It may have also been connected to the Minoans as well. Very mysterious culture.
Who also had female leaders.
That's true. Perhaps I shouldn't put them in great or lesser king. I should put them in slay queen.
Oh, I thought you were going to say lesser queen, but
yeah. The only thing they're slaying is Ea Nasir and the quality of their copper.
I was playing Total War Pharaoh and I got Ian Nasir as an ancillary, and he sucks.
Oh, of course he sucks. He's the worst quality copper.
Yeah,
That's the one Bronze Age meme that everyone knows.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Yeah, I offer you this.
Okay, and are you gonna show some of Cyprus, maybe the beautiful hills and beaches of Cyprus?
Oh, did not mean
specifically the city of Enkomi was a main site of Alashia. See if they can show it. And Cyprus was really known for their art. A lot of the greatest examples of Phoenician art actually come from Cyprus. And this was also a point of transmission of Greek culture to the east and Phoenician culture to the west, towards Greece. So we kind of owe the development of Western civilization to the Cypriots.
Where's Paphos?
Paphos. Well, as you can search, right?
True.
Archaeological sites generally don't show up on Google Maps very well.
Wait, what is this? There's a Mount Olympus in Cyprus?
Yes, there is actually a secondary Mount Olympus in Cyprus, and some have speculated that the reason you don't find any gods on the Mount Olympus in Greece is because that's not the Mount Olympus the Greek gods actually live on. But now there's an observatory, so...
Sorry, what was that? You froze up.
I said that What did I say? Oh, these people may be speculating. Oh, the original Mount Olympus was actually not in Greece, but in Cyprus, the one that they referred to, perhaps.
I mean, that would actually make a lot of sense because a lot of the Greek gods actually came from the east.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Aphrodite is well known as being from Cyprus. She's just the Greek version of the Phoenician Astarte or Ashtart from, Canaan.
Yeah,
Speaking
she's
of
also.
which,
I was going to say just that she's also called Kypris, the lady of Cyprus.
mm-hmm. Okie dokes. And we're comfortable with giving them Lesser King. I think these both can sit in Lesser King for now. We're now in Amuru. We're going to Amuru. I created this little thingamajigger. Okay, Amuru. Well, they are a vassal that kind of gets kicked back and forth, but are pretty strong in their own right, I think. They gave a lot of trouble to the Egyptian vassals, sending their Habiru to raid Ribhada of Byblos again and again and again, and he never stops complaining about the Ashtirtas taking my cities. The city of the king will be lost. Muru, it gives a lot of trouble for the Egyptians. The Egyptians kind of neglected, though, and I'll get to why Egypt is neglecting foreign affairs. But eventually, their king, Aziru, this dude, gets taken back to Egypt and blinded. But he ends up going back to his country and then submitting to the Hittites. So, and he forms an alliance with the king of Kadesh, Etakama, and they both use Habiru to sort of assert their independence in the midst of, border conflicts between the Hittites and the Egyptians. Of course, the Amuru kingdom took an L in this period from the Mitanni, which is kind of embarrassing to take an L from the Mitanni. They're well past their prime in the 1300s.
Hey, they had some good chariots.
That's true. They're number one in chariots, but
number one in chariots. I give you best chariot, great deal.
Yes, I am telling you, very number one, very best chariot. As Indra ride his chariot, as you ride this chariot, to conquer all of Mesopotamia. And of course, I'm referring to the fact that the Mitanni kingdom, their elite, spoke an Indo-Aryan language, which I kind of cheekily said, oh, the forgotten Hindu kingdom of Syria and Iraq. And that actually got views somehow, but only from people from India.
Is that surprising?
Not really. It was the intention. But I'm not used to winning. Now I'm so tired of winning.
Oh, I thought you said I'm not used to women. I was like, wait, what? That doesn't make sense.
I'm used to women, but I'm not used to winning. So where are we going to put the kingdom of Amuru?
I'd say maybe. Honestly, I don't know. I have a hard time saying with this one.
Well, I guess we can present arguments. I think you can't say they're a great king. That's absolutely ridiculous for them to be a great king. But whether they're a vassal king or a lesser king, I mean, they took an L from Mitanni, and then after causing trouble for the Egyptians, they submit to the Hittites. I'm leaning towards vassal king.
Yeah, I can see that. So, where was the territory of Amuru again?
That's the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon.
Oh, so freaking beautiful. I wish I could visit there. But
they're also in the Lebanon and anti-Lebanon mountains all the way up to the coast. So they conquer Tripoli, they conquer Sumer, not Sumer, but Sumur, which is Samira in classical sources. So the coast of the Levant, just north of Byblos, they absolutely wreck shop. So they're a powerful regional state. Of the Canaanite regional states, they're one of the strongest by far.
So, fun fact, This is the Baikal Valley, right? This
Yeah.
green. So, I mean, to be fair, it's more than just that. But one of the reasons that the Baikal Valley is so green is there's a lot of cannabis that's grown there.
Yeah, I knew you would say that. Amuru and in the Baikal Valley is number one in 420.
Yeah, just make sure that. Yeah, I mean, it's like a little war zone there. I was watching a Vice documentary a while ago. I mean, I've seen it multiple times, but where like it's basically like the Wild West there. Like people like there's people who have they have freaking RPGs. Like it is insane. Like in order and like they fight the government. I mean, to be fair, the Lebanese government isn't, quite the which I mean it is kind of interesting though because of how you have these clashes, and it's like, oh, this is something new, but really it's something that's been going on throughout history. You have like this one quote unquote nation, this one quote unquote um like entity, but within it there's so many different entities that it's like to say that it is one thing is it's like saying, oh, Syria, okay, but which kingdom in Syria? Or oh, Canaan, which Canaanite kingdom?
Yes, exactly. And the Lebanese state is kind of like a really uneasy sort of situation between these coastal cities, which in the modern day are mainly or have historically been Christian, let's say, and the inner Lebanon, which is closer to Syria, which is more Shia. And like the Bekaa Valley is God's Hezbollah country. And you can go to Baalbek, which is the great archaeological site of this region, and buy a Hezbollah t-shirt, which I'm tempted to do. And of course, this was going on in the Bronze Age as well. Ribhada obviously representing a coastal Canaanite, and Aziru and Abdiashtirta in the kingdom of Amuru, they're more inland. They're more conservative at the same time, more revolutionary. In other aspects, it's complicated. There's the business interest versus, the sheep interest. Yeah, that's cool. We got to show some of that. We're pulling at all the stops visually. Is that Baalbek? Yeah, it's a legendary area. Definitely travel to Lebanon. Number one in food in the world. Number one in beauty, especially for Banat. Definitely go there if you get a chance. Maybe the north. The north where it's a little bit farther from those shitty ass fascist Israelis. Anyway.
I was going to say though that Rare Earth, I think that's the channel. They recently made a video about how Temple of Venus, how he recently got arrested and interrogated in Lebanon, while he was making like his Lebanon series, because they thought because he got accused of being an Israeli spy, and apparently the only reason that the I mean, it also because there's a lot of, I mean, just in general, the whole region, there's a lot of spying going on, so everybody's on high alert. But like, he was going around just taking pictures of different stuff, and especially in such a tense time, people see that they're like, oh, this person must be doing this, and then it just so happened that he is friends with someone who is like a hot, like relative. Ooh, pretty flowers.
Well,
pretty. Yeah.
This dude is pretty sketchy. Rare Earth, the guy who does Rare Earth channel. His parents are like from these billionaires that have put in a lot of money into politics to manipulate politics in a certain sort of way. So I don't blame the Lebanese government for arresting him. He probably, of all the YouTubers who would be a spy, he would be a spy.
Well, I mean, that's not even why they arrested him. It was just because he, like was it some random people, they just saw him taking pictures or whatever, and then they rushed him over to the police station, and they're like, "This guy's an Israeli spy. This guy's an Israeli spy." And then because of all the bureaucracy, even after uh, even after the police knew that he wasn't, they had to go through all these hoops just in order to get him released by the judge. But I mean, I think that's a result of the European bureaucracy that got introduced with the French.
Well, certainly the French are notorious for their bureaucracy. They did a thing with that in Asterix and Obelix, about the bureaucracy as being one of the 12 and the most difficult of the 12 labors of Asterix and Obelix was to go to the house that drives people mad. And it's essentially just trying to get paperwork done in Paris, basically. So and Morocco has the same problem. Also, talking about 420, I was recently in the Rif Mountains in Morocco, and I climbed up the mountains literally and passed by a lot of people growing that sweet Kush. Didn't
Wait,
taste it myself.
so you're telling me that I mean, obviously I know this, but you're telling me that they grow reefer in Rif?
That's probably where the name reefer comes from.
Yeah, it's also similar with kif and kef in Arabic and Hebrew. It means fun, enjoyment.
Yeah, there's a lot of keef as well. I won't point fingers and name names, but people are imbibing. Sometimes people do get high in their own supply, yet they're still conscious and focused enough they can walk up these narrow goat paths really quickly in literally flip-flops. That's what they're wearing, the shepherds. You'd think they'd be wearing like durable boots, but no, flip-flops. Always flip-flops.
Oh,
and occasionally, like a Western tourist will try to climb up the mountain high off his ass, and then he'll fall down, and they'll have to call a helicopter from the city, from Tangier or even Shewan, to pick up the dumb tourist who gets high and then falls off a cliff.
Yikes. Also, I think you'd appreciate the meme. You know what this is?
Is this the Temple of Baal Shamim?
I mean, I'm not sure maybe, but I was just going to say this is the Western Wall.
I see. The Western Wall of Baal.
Yeah.
Another mystery about Baalbek for people who don't know about it is one of the oldest things at Baalbek is this gigantic block that was too big for people to ever. People think that they can't move it, so they're like, "Oh, it must be aliens." And I kind of joked around, like, there were elephants in Syria. Maybe they got elephants to move it. Perhaps we'll talk more about the elephants later. Syrian elephants.
So
are you ready to move on to the next one?
Yeah, just real quick. Where are those? What's the term? The the three stones, the giant stones.
Goodness, I forget. I think let's not waste time on that. We're doing
Right.
Geopolitics now, not.
You're right.
Ancient aliens debunked. Okay, back to this. And we put it in Vassal King. Because they're vassals. They took an L from Mitanni, they submitted to Hittites. They were able to dance around Egypt, but Egypt was kind of a joke in this period. Oh. I think Akhenaten is super overrated, personally. Super interesting, but super overrated and a horrible leader from the perspective of politics.
I don't know if you caught this before. De Gaulle Kama said that. De Gaulle Kama said that joke is worse than Ian Nasir's copper.
Yeah, I saw that. That one's funny.
Yeah,
it's. They said that sound vibrations could have moved these rocks. I don't think so. It would take some really loud sounds, like.
Wait.
Maybe toots.
Oh, I thought you were going to say maybe the.
Oh, are you ready? Ready? Let's rape some ears. I mean, grape for the algorithm. Let's grape some ears. That was fun. Okay, what was the next state? We have Arzawa. Arzawa. Okay, well, Arzawa is actually, I think, it is a credible case for Great King, perhaps, especially in the beginning of this time period, because their king, goodness, Tahundaradu, that's a mouthful. He was able to create an alliance among every state along the Hittite frontier to attack the Hittites at once. And they were even able to sack the Hittite capital of Hattusha and drive them out. So the Hittites have to go run away to one of their secondary cities. I'm not sure if it's Nerik or Zalpa or Kanesh that they end up hiding in. But it's only because Shupiluluma is a freaking military genius that they're able to beat back all these different kingdoms that attack the Hittites all at once. And Tarhundaradu had a close relationship with the king of Egypt as an equal or near equal. The king of Egypt asked him specifically to send some Kashkin barbarians.
Ooh.
And he as slaves, of course, because they're very exotic. And the king of Arzawa also sent one of his daughters or sisters, perhaps, to marry Amenhotep III, one of his many, many foreign trophy wives. Where are we going to put Arzawa? But of course, they took an L to Shupiluluma, but anyone would take an L to Shupiluluma.
Yeah, he's got Soupy in his name.
Yeah, he's very Shupy. Like, he has a funny sounding name, but he is no joke. Yeah. He was like the Assyrians before the Assyrians.
Yeah, his name's funny and all, but you laugh at him and he'll have you beheaded.
Mm-hmm. He's one of the big villains in my second book, Hail Like the Sun. He's one of the Sun Kings.
Wait, he's the son of a king or the king of a son?
A little bit of both. I mean, he's the son. We'll get into this when we talk about the Hittites, but he's not the oldest son of his father, Tudhaliya II. How he comes to the throne is very important for the story of the late Bronze Age. But where are we going to put Arzawa? And maybe you can show a little bit of Arzawa. You got Anatolia up there on the screen?
Yeah, so you said more or less it's like Ephesus?
Yeah, Ephesus is, their capital is Ephesus, which was then called Apasa. But they actually controlled a lot of Anatolia, pretty much the western third of Anatolia. If you zoom out, yeah, basically like the whole western third was part of the Arzawan Confederacy, including smaller states like Mira, Chapala, Secha, Riverland. Ahyawa was kind of allied with them. Wilusha was with them. They didn't really conquer Lucca. They didn't really incorporate Lucca, but no one can conquer Lucca, you know? They're a bunch of crazy, tough little pirates.
So, and there's an interesting theory that the term Amalek, which, you know, it's this idea of basically the big baddie in Judaism, that Amalek might have actually originated as Amluka.
That's possible. Of course, Lucca has been identified pretty conclusively with classical Lycia, which is around the area of Antalya. So this first little hump on Anatolia. There's the big hump, the first hump, and then there's the little hump by Syria. It's the first hump.
Oh, here?
Yeah, like right where your cursor is. That's Lucca. Well, right now we're talking about Arzawa, and that's pretty much the whole western third. They are one of the ones that could potentially give the Hittites a run for their money if they didn't have a strong king.
Also, so you mentioned Mira. Is Mira Izmir?
Yeah, that could be it, I think. Mira
Because
is definitely in the sort of like the northwest. And yeah, Mira and Izmir, that sounds credible. Yeah.
the reason is because I know that there's this whole connection between Smyrna, which is Izmir, but that um, um, like I forget exactly how it connects, but basically the whole myth of King Kiniras and his daughter Mira, who I think Adonis is born from them or something.
Hmm.
But that what else is kind of interesting, which I mean, it's one of those things where it's kind of like I don't know, you could just find patterns anywhere. But that who was born in Izmir or in Smyrna?
Sabotage V.
Yeah.
Which is funny because like I've also been working on a project about Shabbatai V.
Yeah, and it is interesting because he was like especially going in with the whole like Adonis story, he was in a lot of ways trying to bring back some of these antinomian but like sexual rituals, stuff that would have been commonplace in the ancient Near Eastern world, but that had been done away with, and all of a sudden. I mean, to be fair, I'm not saying that he wasn't a bit Meshuggah, but like I think that it's one of those things where go back 2,000 years, he would have just been seen as like, okay, maybe he's not like orthodox, but like he's part of a group of people doing something like that. Whereas like that, eventually you end up having a lot of the stuff get mystified. So like this whole idea of a sacred marriage, it all becomes mystical, spiritual. They're like it sheds all its mundane facets, for lack of a better term.
He certainly had his charisma. The fact that about half of the Jewish community at the time followed him is really pretty spectacular. And Shabbatai Tzvi, after he converted to Islam, still was a prominent religious figure. 10,000 of his most devoted followers continued, following him in Islam, and their descendants are still practicing this weird form of
Are they
Islam
though?
today, kind of. Well, not quite, but everyone in Turkey has these weird anti-Semitic theories that, you know,
Oh yeah, the Ataturk. He was secretly Jewish.
they make any problem that Turkey has out to be like the Dunma, the crypto Jews were involved in it. This is a funny comment. If they sin enough, then God will come back. I roll. Well, I mean, they tried not sinning for a while, and God didn't come back. So no, we just sin. Maybe God will come back.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I've just had don't make me turn this world around. Like
Back,
don't make
back,
me turn the
back
car
to
around.
Arzawa. Where do we put Arzawa?
Uh honestly, I would maybe because think about it. If we're going to say that no great king can take an L, then there's not going to be any great kings.
True. I would say it's definitely a great king, but kind of like on the weaker side of great kings.
So like
I
maybe
can't put Arzawa in the great kings category. It would either be the weakest of the great kings or the strongest of the lesser kings, depending on where we rank some of these other ones.
Our kings of Arzawa, they're great.
Yeah. That's funny. Well, now we have fan favorite Assyria. Oh, I need to show. I moved Arzawa to Great King. Now I put up Assyria. Let's go to Assyria. Yeah, well, so the history of Assyria in this period is actually really interesting. This is when they start actually kind of like coming back. So Assyria kind of been really weak, like a vassal passed around by the Mitanni and the Babylonians and the Hittites and whatever for hundreds of years after the defeat of, Ishme Dagon by the king of Mari and Yamhad. 400 years Assyria languishes in the dustbin of history, but it's kind of working in the background, trying to build up its strength, to build up its economy. Under Ashur-uballit, they take advantage of this collapse of Mitanni that we're seeing to assert their independence and even become powerful in their own right. And they create a diplomatic marriage with the king of Babylon, a coerced diplomatic marriage. And then they assert their control over Kassite Babylon to a certain extent in this time period, in the late 1300s BC.
Holy crap. That's a lot of flat land. Well,
are we looking at Assyria right now?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of these ruins that were associated with Assyria were destroyed by the Islamic State, and a lot of them were destroyed by the Turkish government as well. We should also remember that the Turkish government destroyed many important historical sites like Ain Dara, one of the last remaining Hittite temples that is sort of like the best example of a Near Eastern temple that we can kind of understand like how the Jewish temple may have looked. Well, the Turkish flattened this important historic temple of Ain Dara. So they're as bad as ISIS, really.
Wait, you're telling me that a government that does all this shit to the Kurds, that they're as bad as ISIS?
Yeah. At least in terms of destruction of antiquities. Let's talk about Assyria. Where do you think it fits? Do you think it fits in Lesser King, Vassal King, or Great King? Because I see a case that could be made for each of them. Great King because it's able to exert power over what's traditionally considered a great king, Babylon.
I think you mean it's able to assert.
Yes, it asserts it. But you can make a case that it's a lesser king because, or even a vassal king, because it literally, at this beginning of this century, it is a vassal of Mitanni. So it's really a very difficult one from my perspective to choose.
I would say maybe like upper minor king or like upper lesser king. I mean.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll keep that tentatively there. Should it be above Ahiawa?
I'd say so.
Yeah. Syria's pretty boss.
This is interesting though. So
Shield boss.
What is up? Do you know if they ever like settled this island like across from them in the middle of the Tigris? Wait, is this? Okay, yeah, that's interesting. You have this island straight in the middle of the Tigris.
Well, that's going to be something modern. The course of rivers and the sea changes over time. So you were looking at the port of Miletus earlier. Mm-hmm. That would have been right on the coast in antiquity, but the coast moved because of changing sea levels and shaping of the geographic environment. It's complicated. So the coast moved. Especially because of the Little Ice Age. With rivers, it moves constantly. So the river will move. Don't really take anything particularly seriously about where an island is today. No. Even the environment would have been different. The region where Assyria is now in, which is called the Jazeera of Iraq, it's called an island because it's surrounded by desert, but it's actually very rich and very fertile. The most fertile section of Iraq.
Wait, you're telling me what is on our screen right now is the most fertile section of Iraq?
Or in antiquity.
Okay, so you're telling me what is on the screen right now in antiquity was the most fertile part of Iraq?
Yeah, or one of the most fertile parts.
Jeez, who is this guy, Baal?
Okay, you're funny. Okay, well, we've ranked Assyria. I'm going to go back to the tier list. I put Assyria in Lesser King, and at the top of Lesser King. I might move it to Greater King later on. Now we have another one. We have Elam.
Babilu.
I like the bullhead, the cow babe. The cow babe. With the cup. So Elam is kind of like a really weird state in the late Bronze Age. It's kind of on the margin of what's civilized, the civilized world, yet it's one of the oldest civilizations and most sophisticated in the world at this time period. They had continuous civilization since as long as the Sumerians, uninterrupted, a unique culture, a unique societal structure, which was actually matrilineal instead of patrilineal. So we have records about some of their queens as well from this time period, which is kind of unusual for the late Bronze Age. And this was a time of a resurgence of Elamite power because the Kassites are kind of getting weaker. So the Elamites are able to kind of push around the Babylonians a little bit in this time period. Their king Untash-Naparisha, I think he was actually even mentioned in the Dead Poets Society, if I'm not mistaken, the one with Robin Williams, as being like a king who was very strong in his own time, but has been basically buried and forgotten. Which is kind of like the whole deal with Elam. They're really strong, but no one knows anything about them.
So this is embarrassing. When you said Elam, I thought you said Babylon.
Ah, Babylon. The one that I actually used for Babylon doesn't even look Babylonian, but it's specifically for the Kassites. The Kassites, who are actually maybe related to the Elamites. They come from the Zagros Mountains as well. The Elamites is a big mystery. I've generally seen them regarded as either a great king or at least an independent lesser king, like somewhere around Assyria or a little bit higher than Assyria for sure.
Yeah,
What do you put Elam?
I'd say probably lesser king as well.
But ahead of Assyria or behind Assyria?
I'd say maybe behind. Not because of their actual impact, but more so because of their memory.
But they do have a big architectural impact. The site of Chogha Zanbil in modern day Iran. Do you have that on the screen?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's really spectacular. One of those great ziggurats, and it was actually built in, I think, in the late Bronze Age, not in the early or middle Bronze Age, which was kind of unusual for ziggurats. They were pretty strong as late Bronze Age states came. And most late Bronze Age states were not building massive monuments like the Egyptians, but the Elamites were. They were secure enough that they could build, these grand monuments instead of only these city walls and devoting to the military. They were strong beyond the military. They were strong culturally and economically. And they had ties even as far as India. And certainly in Arabia, the kingdom of Dilmun in Qatar and Bahrain may have been subject to Elam at this point because the control of the Babylonians, the Kassite Babylonians, was kind of less at this point. So sort of that area we're seeing on the screen.
And it is worth mentioning the way they oriented their how do I do this? Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to turn the camera. Can I? Well, anyway, the way that they oriented their map was actually, rather than how we see it like this, it would have been slightly rotated. Yeah, I don't know how I'd be able to rotate this. I feel really dumb, but anyway, yeah, basically that the Persian Gulf was seen as like the bottom, and the top was up, like in Turkey, right?
Yeah, it was like the region of Shubartum was seen as the end of the world for the Sumerians and the Akkadians. Of course, with time going on, their perception of the world got bigger in the north and the west, but they kind of lost contact with what was in the east, apart from tenuous trade routes. I think as Graham Pong was saying, they are a language isolate, although it's possible that they were related to the Hurrians or to the Kassites or the Gutians, the Lulubians. We really don't know. There's not enough of these languages attested. And a spice trader civilization, if there was going to be a spice trader civilization, it would be Elam. They had ties to India, and that's about as best you can do in the late Bronze Age for spices.
Would that be like Harappan?
Yeah, well, the Harappan civilization kind of collapsed by this point, and the Indo-Aryans, who were related to the Mitanni, which we'll talk about later, moved into the Indus Valley and the Ganges plains. And they're kind of like a Near Eastern civilization that happens to be in India. They
So
may
like
be related to the Bactria Margiana complex as well.
so like the reverse of those Indo-Aryan kings in Syria.
Well, they are Indo-Aryan, so they would have a similar culture to the Mitanni, but they're entering into India, which is
Oh,
a
no, but
Dravidian tradition rather
yeah,
than a Hurrian tradition.
yeah, I was more so just commenting on this idea of people from India going west to the Middle East versus again Indo-Aryan, but that they're from the Middle East and they're going east.
There also would have Graham Pong also mentioned an Arabian spice trade. There almost certainly would have been an Arabian spice trade. There is talk about the Egyptian queen Hatshepsut trading with Punt for spices and frankincense. Now we've officially identified Punt as the land around Eritrea and Ethiopia, sort of.
Baboons.
Yes, the baboons. It was the baboons. The Roma were not from ancient Egypt. They were much later, and they came from the region from Punjab and Rajasthan in the Middle Ages. After that region was conquered by Mahmud of Ghazni, who was a very brutal and tyrannical Muslim leader. And there were multiple Indian exoduses into the West.
Yeah, you have the Roma, the Doma, and the Loma, I think.
Yes, that's right. And I think the Roma history deserves more attention. They were slaves in Europe for 500 years, and their conditions are not far from how African Americans are in the United States in Eastern Europe. A very, very difficult situation, and still a lot of de jure segregation in Hungary and Romania. It's a very difficult situation, and of course, Sacha Baron Cohen took advantage of these people when he made the Borat movie to sort of mock them instead of create attention for their issues.
Yeah, I was just going back to real quick about the mention about the Roma. So, I mean, that isn't to say that there isn't this connection to Egypt, but simply that that's not where the Roma originally were from.
Well, the thing is, the Roma people didn't really know where they came from, so they kind of just believed what the Europeans around them were telling them. They lost their history.
But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, like a really interesting history, and just a lot of forgotten history because the people who had the stories, people didn't tend to, historians weren't as interested in their stories, and then you can only go so far back into the past because once oral stories are gone, it's only memory.
Okay, well, I guess moving on. We've put, where did we put us? We put Assyria in. No, we put Elam in Lesser King. The next one we have is Enishasi, and this is going to be our first really tiny one with 420. This one's also in the Bekaa Valley, and they're like the vassal that gets kicked around by vassals. They get kicked around by Amuru. They get kicked around by Kadesh. They even get kicked around by Mutbal in Pella. I didn't make a little one for Pella, which may have been related to the Israelites or maybe not. I kind of leaned into that for my own story to give a credible origin for the Israelites based on history, but really no one knows. Enishasi, I don't really see a case for anything other than weak Khmer. I only put them in here because I wanted to have at least one in the weak Khmer category. If you've ever seen my movie Kart Kadesh, and I invite people to watch it, I'll put it up on the screen, the name of it, so they can look it up. You'll know what I'm talking about with Enishasi. Enishasi is an absolute joke.
Hey, but his view ain't no joke.
It is very beautiful. It's one of those cities in the Bekaa Valley. And it's one of the ones that had at least two kings mentioned, although there are two kings complaining about foreign or other vassal kings, invading their territory. And of course, the Hittites marched through here. So there are battles between the Egyptians and the Hittites were frequently in this region in the Bekaa Valley because it's this choke point.
Seems like they could have really used some peace pipes.
No, we think that people hit up that Amku leaf would be a little bit more chill, but unfortunately not. And Anashasi is in weak man category.
Sad week.
And you get a little bit of the Bekaa. Before we move on to the next one, which is Gezer. I remember this one because the not safe for work icon that I used for it, which is based on a real Canaanite scarab. I've been looking for erotic Canaanite art for ages, and I finally found an erotic Canaanite art from a scarab in Megiddo, and I thought it'd be a beautiful symbolic, use for Gezer, because what we know about Gezer in this period, the Amarna period, particularly in the time of Amenhotep III, is the pharaoh Amenhotep III asked their king Melkilu to always bring beautiful female cupbearers, and it was like a matter of urgency for the state that he gets his obelisk wet. If you know what I mean. The pharaoh's colossus. He would send for women from Canaan.
Under the shadow of the Colossus?
Yeah. Well, the Colossus of Memnon was built by Amenhotep III.
That's in Ethiopia?
No, that's in Egypt, I think, near the border with Sudan, if I'm not mistaken. No, not. The Colossus of Memnon is one of the largest statues of the ancient world. Amenhotep III is kind of referred to as Amenhotep the Magnificent. He certainly had a magnificent taste in gals, that's for sure. He liked Palestinian women. Who doesn't? And Gezer was his conduit.
I think I found the ghost of Gezer.
You're showing Gezer now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I was actually in Gezer, Tel Gezer, about a year ago in August. Yes, 2 months before that thing happened, the thing that everyone knows about. I was in Palestine then, 2 months before it, and I almost died trying to get to the top of that tell, which gives you a good saying like why it would have been so strong defensively. There was no natural hill there, or at least the natural hill is so buried by subsequent cities at this point that it was already like a huge hill just of human construction. It's absolutely massive, and it's a pain in the butt to get up there. I'll have to say it looks easy when you show it, but it's really hard. And Gezer may have been one of these regional powers. So the king of Gezer, Milkilu, was married to the daughter of Tagi, who is the king of Ginti. And Ginti is pretty far north from Gezer. And he also was able to subject King Zimred of Lachish, which is pretty far south from Gezer. Gezer is the absolute hegemon of the Shephelah. And pretty far north from there as well. Gezer is really underrated as far as Canaanite cities are concerned.
Oh, wow. So, I don't know how I never connected this before, but so, yeah, the city of Lachish, there was this one, I forget what his actual name was, but Reish Lachish. Do you know who I'm referring to?
No, I'm trying to jog my memory a little bit.
So he was some rabbi who I guess he had what could be read as some sort of like homoerotic affair with the brother of his wife or something, but I can't remember for the life of me. Wait, Yeah, Reish Lakish. Shimon ben Lakish. Interesting. I wonder. Maybe the name was taken after the city. Like his father was maybe named after the city. I'm not really sure. But anyway, yeah, just a quick aside thought I'd mention.
Well, talking about Gezer even outside of this period, Gezer, even according to the Bible, was never conquered by the Israelites. It was conquered by the Egyptian king Necho, who then offered it as a betrothal gift to Solomon, which means that the Canaanite citizens of Gezer were incorporated into this mythical Israelite state of the unified kingdom of Israel without needing to convert, without being slaughtered. And what we see later on with Lachish, which is not far from Gezer, a little bit south, is it was besieged and conquered by the Assyrians during their conquest. And my little conspiracy theory is that King Hezekiah wasn't really so interested in protecting Lachish. He sent all of his troops and all of his resources to reinforce Jerusalem because he wanted to destroy a rival Canaanite cult center at Lachish specifically, which was perhaps the biggest cult rival site in the kingdom of Judah to Jerusalem. And he wanted to clean his hands of it. He didn't want to be directly responsible for it. He wanted the Assyrians to show why Jerusalem is good, but Lachish and their cult is bad. Because Jerusalem didn't have the only temple in the kingdom of Judah, which we know from archaeology, that there were plenty of very substantial temples. One of them, I believe, was at Lachish in the Iron Age. Different period. A legacy of Gezer, we'll say.
Yeah, wow. Lachish, it's interesting. You can see it was just totally flat, and like there's very basic outlines of the temple, but beyond that, just flat.
No. Comments. Yeah, Gezer was a big deal. Where do you put Gezer?
Maybe I'd say maybe vassal.
Vassal king. They were pretty strong.
Maybe
a
like
little bit more than just a mayor. I couldn't see that. He was like Milkilu was treated with Labayu as an equal, not as a subordinate. They say Milkilu and Labayu leading the rebellion, and then they fought each other as equals. I put vassal king for sure. That's pretty good for a little boy from the Shephelah. Now, for a little boy who stubbed his toe and keeps whining about it, we have Gubla or Byblos. This is one of these Egyptianized cities in Phoenicia. They were one of the earliest Canaanite kings mentioned that actually had an Egyptian-style sarcophagus set up for himself, an Egyptian-style tomb set up for himself, and treated with the king of Egypt at the time, which I think would have been... It's not... These Middle Egyptian kings, come on. It's not Amenemhet. It was the other one. Who was the other big king of the Middle Egyptian kingdom? I'm drawing a blank. But in short, they were big then. But by the late Bronze Age, the king Ribhada had a lot of internal divisions in his city. And it was one of the biggest economic centers in the late Bronze Age for trade, especially with Egypt. They were number one in trade with Egypt, with the cedar trade, with the Murex trade. But then they kept getting besieged by the Amorites. The Amuru kept picking off their allied cities one by one until they were completely surrounded. And it got so desperate for Byblos. They were starving. And they sold the furniture of all the wealthy people in Byblos to buy grain in the land of Yarimuta, which may have been like the Yarmouk river valley, around like the Esarhaddon plains, maybe Tel Aviv and Jaffa. I'm gonna remove this banner. So Byblos, they sell the furniture, then they end up selling the sons and daughters of the city into slavery to buy food. So that's a pretty big L. And then eventually Rib Hada.
Are you sure? Are you sure they weren't just turning them into Malbashi?
Got a reference to our Pimp Quest. No, maybe they were eventually, but they preferred to sell them first. They're merchants, they're monsters. We're merchants. We're not monsters.
Well, no, because there are some Meshuggahs going around the internet claiming that the Phoenicians were selling humans as food.
They would eat their children in terms of siege. In the deprivation of a siege, you could see that. But I think it was a bold statement of wisdom on the part of Rib Hada in a desperate situation to choose to sell the children into slavery, a very tough decision, rather than to eat them. There was the possibility that they could be repatriated later with Egyptian support. Of course, Egyptian support never came because Akhenaten was off in crazy land worshiping the sun. And eventually his brother, the brother of Rib Hada, Ilirapi, overthrows his brother thinking, I can do a better job. He couldn't. Byblos fell to the Amuru kingdom. It's impressive that Byblos held out as long as it did for how little support it got. But that doesn't change the fact that it absolutely kept taking L after L in their fight with the Amorites. Where do we put them?
Honestly, maybe like a lesser king. I don't know.
Lesser king? I mean, they're obviously a vassal of Egypt.
Oh, yeah, so I'd say maybe like a vassal king, like a strong vassal.
I don't think, I think you can make a case that the personal leadership of Rib Hada, despite how whiny he comes across in the Amarna corpus, based on his decisions, in a deep analysis of his decisions, he may have been pretty cunning and clever. I was kind of like leaning quite in the opposite direction, that it was actually quite weak.
Well, that's what happens when you worship Balat Gabal.
Yeah, there was a lot of internal divisions. The bigger a city you have, the more factions there will be. And relatively, the Amorites seem to have been relatively unified around charismatic leaders like Azuru and Abdiashtirta. Byblos is filled with internal divisions. There was the priesthood, which demanded, all these sacrifices, all these costly donatives by the rulers. There was the merchant elite that expected to make a profit. And then there's the average citizens who expected not to have their children sold into slavery. Thank you very much.
Wait, so which priesthood?
The priesthood of Balat Gabal. And actually, Byblos, because there's such a rich textual corpus, 1/3, 60 out of almost a third of the entire Amarna corpus deals with Byblos and was written by Rib Hada. We know about some of these people. So there is the high priestess of Balat Gabal is actually mentioned in the sources. Her name is Umahnu. And she kind of would pressure the king to do things that might not be in his interest to sort of maintain the peace with the gods. It was a very complicated task being a king of a very large city-state back in those days. I think Rib Hada is underrated, personally. He had an impossible situation. He did as best as he could.
Rib Hada, for your pleasure.
Okay. All right, show a little bit of Byblos. We can talk a bit more about Byblos. They kind of bounced back after the late Bronze Age collapse faster than the other coastal cities. In the Tale of Wenamun, where the Egyptian sailor was shipwrecked, he was just say, "Oh, I'm a servant of the pharaoh," and like the king of Byblos, Jekerbal, which is probably just Zakrbal, because they don't have a Z in Egyptian. He's like, "Yeah, I know you're serving the pharaoh. I don't give a shit. The pharaoh is nothing. I'm Zakrbal." If even Byblos is not loyal to Egypt, Egypt is in pretty dire straits, and that represents Egypt after the late Bronze Age collapse.
So it's kind of like almost like America and Israel.
Yeah, I guess like Byblos is that kind of Egyptian power on the coast. They have Egyptianized Canaanites. Many of these Phoenician city-states had rulers that had Egyptian deities in their name, like Amunira was the king of Beirut. And the Canaanites of the coast, they practiced a lot of Egyptian customs, including Egyptian funerary customs, like mummification, and they had Egyptianizing sarcophaguses. If you go to the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, you can see some of these sarcophagi.
Yeah, and it does make you kind of wonder whether like that's where this reference to stuff like Joseph being embalmed and buried as like the Egyptians were, even though his body was brought back to Canaan.
Okay. Now, Byblos is very beautiful. I think it's one of the most beautiful cities in modern day Lebanon.
Another really, I mean, just real quick, Ras al Nokra or Rosh al Nikra, one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. It's like right on the northern border, and the southern border.
Is that where Oxiv land is?
Oh my God! You know about that?
Yeah, I know about all the weirdos and the kooks out there.
It's close, but not quite. But no, these are the grottos.
For those of you who don't know what Oxiv land is, it's a microstate created by a crazy Russian Jewish guy and his wife.
Wait, so you mean a Russian Jewish guy?
What?
I said, so you mean a Russian Jewish guy?
Yeah, because they're all crazy. I was in the occupied territories, and Russian people are kind of like at the bottom of society, at least of Jewish society there. People have this idea that white people, like in America and Europe, are on the top of society in Israel. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Obviously, Ashkenazis, in general, have positions of high power, but Russians are kind of like on the bottom because they're not seen as being fully Jewish.
Well, it also depends on how long, because really what you're talking about is Soviet.
Yeah, the Soviet Jewish Russians. And the reason they're so white isn't because, they have... Well, it's because the Soviet Union was so tolerant of Jews, but at the same time didn't brook them being separate, that Jewish people just were like anyone else in the Soviet Union. They marry a Russian, who cares? You marry a Ukrainian, who cares? You marry a Georgian, who cares? So it just ended up with Russian Jews looking like Russians, not with the Ashkenazi features we're familiar with that make them look like they're from the Middle East still. All right. What's next? Okay, let's go back to now we have, I believe this is the kingdom of Hazor. And obviously Hazor is really strong. It's this big, political center, economic center, right on that little strip of territory between the Sea of Galilee and the Med. And they got really arrogant. They got really big-headed. And Abdi Tirshi, he's a character in both of my books, and he's one of the most obnoxious ones. Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but what we know about Hazor is it was destroyed around this time, and it was destroyed in a very specific way. It wasn't like the whole city was universally destroyed and looted. We've seen signs that specifically the symbols of royal and religious power were destroyed in Hazor. And people have taken this as evidence of the Israelite conquest, as in Joshua. But I could easily see a completely different interpretation that it was a local rebellion among the citizens of Hazor against their ruling elite. And we also see there was a war between the king of Hazor and the king of Pella, Mutbal. And the king of Hazor had a tenuous alliance with the king of Damascus, Beryawaza, as well. I'll talk about them later.
Wait, his name was Mutbal? That's like
Mutbal.
that's like someone's name being Satan Jesus.
Well, I think they usually, this Mutbal, as in Mutbah, was like not death, but like man of Baal. And
Oh.
a lot of scholars took him as being the same as Eshbal in the Bible, but it's such a common name. It's such a basic bitch kind of name that really you can't say anything for sure. But he was from the Transjordan, and he was the son of Labayu of Shechem. And these are the areas in which the ancient Israelites were known from the Bible to have been very active in that sort of time period in the mythology. So I'm not a complete maximalist or a complete minimalist. I'm kind of in the middle. If there was ancient Israelites in this time period, they would have been related to Labayu and Mutbalu, I would think, in some sense, and their Habiru armies, who absolutely riggedy wrecked Hazor at about this time. Where do we put Hazor? I'm also seeing you're showing Hazor right now.
Yep.
I'm going to show the Hazor thing I made. 1 second. Oh, Hazor. Yeah, Hazor. Let's show Hazor over here. Hazor over here. Gabagool.
Yeah, one of the things that I really wish that there, like, you know, there was like, even if it wouldn't be like 100% accurate, like reconstructions, like digital reconstructions of what it might have looked like.
I remember there was an artist who painted a lot of late Bronze Age cities as they would have looked like. Forget his name. I think it was Hungarian. But he did one of Shechem. He did one of Gezer, I think. I may not have Gezer. But you can look into it. This may exist for Hazor. Hazor. Wow. Just they generally, in the modern day state of Israel, they absolutely bury the history of the Canaanites. And they present an Israelite history that simply isn't attested, and they accept look more fanciful than it would have been to create the notion that they're a civilization equal to the likes of Babylon or Egypt. They're not. I mean, the kingdom of Israel was a regional power. I can maybe... I can show it in my own sharing. Oh. This is a reconstruction of the city of Hazor in the late Bronze Age. To get an idea for that Canaanite royal architecture. It was a big city. Generally, the people who lived in the city were not super poor. But in the event of a siege, they could absolutely face deprivation. And the ruler is essentially, he builds a city or a castle in his city. The palace is a fortification. You notice that he has the crenellations and the murder holes and the gates to protect himself from his own citizens. This is not unique to Hazor. This is just how palaces were in the ancient Near East, particularly in the Levant and Mesopotamia and Anatolia.
So you're telling me this is what palaces were like in Palestine?
Yuck. Okay, where do we put Hazor?
Maybe Vassal King?
I think it's a pretty safe place to put it. Now, one more and then we take a break. And you know this guy?
That looks like a peacock.
Well, it's supposed to be a Hittite sun disk. So we have the Hittites, the Chatti. And At the beginning of this period, Egypt is taking extreme measures to keep the Hittites under control. They're funding all their enemies, and it's working. Arzawa is pushing from the west, Hayasha'azi is pushing from the east, the Kashkins are pushing from the north. Only Kizuwatna is not really causing trouble for the Hittites. But because of the brilliance and strength and ruthlessness of the general, the prince Shupiluliuma, they are able to retake their capital and defeat each of the enemy kings one by one. He's absolutely unmatched. And then after that, he's like, I'm not tired of war. I'm going to invade Syria. And he wipes the floor with Mitanni. He wipes the floor with a lot of different Syrian kingdoms. He destroys Katna and Kadesh, which is actually an Egyptian vassal at this time, kind of unadvisedly, and they actually engage with the Hittites of their own will without the approval of the pharaoh. So Shututara or Sutarna, the king of Kadesh, starts the beef between Egypt and the Hittites that the Hittites really don't want any part of because they don't want to mess with Egypt, but now they're stuck with it because these Egyptian vassal attacks them directly in foolhardy manner. And of course, gets defeated. And, they take advantage of a bad situation and they put their guy on charge, the king Etekama.
So it's just the generic Hittites?
Well, the Hittites this is just the Hittite Empire. And there's something generic about the Hittites. They are epic.
Oh, no. I just meant, is it a specific faction of them?
It's not a specific faction, or it's just the central faction, I guess. The royal faction out of Hattusha, Shupiluma. He comes to power. He was not the oldest son of his father, Tudali II. Tudali III was. But he did a little bit of fratricide, murdering his brother to come to the throne. And this sin was believed to have brought upon the Great Plague that killed Shupiluma and killed his eldest son, Arnuwanda, leaving the throne open for not one of the youngest sons, Mershali II, because he's the only one who didn't have a kingdom of his own at this point, and wasn't killed mysteriously in Egypt like Zenanza. So Mershali II, he's disrespected by all the vassals. Arzawa gives him the middle finger, and Hayasha'azi gives him the middle finger. All the vassals give him the middle finger. He wipes the floor with all of them. Just like his father, even more epically than his father. And the gods take his side, it seems, by sending meteors to batter his enemies. So there's no place to put the Hittites other than Great King and at the top of Great King.
Yep.
They deserve to be way more famous than they are. We should probably even put them in Baal tier.
Barb, so this is called the Sudra. So one thing that's interesting, because a lot of people, especially I don't know, I find it interesting because I forget even where I was at this one time, but I was at this one event and there was this I forget the specifics. Keep in mind there are plenty of Israelis here, but there was just this one who he saw this on my head. He was like, "Oh, if you wore that in Israel, you could get killed." I'm like, dude, what the hell are you on? This is a Sudra. First of all, but then there's plenty of people in Israel, Palestine, who aren't even Palestinian that wear, what would be seen as kafiyas, because obviously it's probably become a lot more political now, but it's more so just about keeping the sun out of your face. But, but no, I like that. I don't know. I like the idea of reclaiming the Sudra because it's what Jews wore before they wore kippot, before they wore yarmulkes. But then what happened was, when they started to be persecuted by Christians in Europe, they had to hide, their head covering, and especially with the advent of I think it's really around the medieval period that you start to have kind of this in between the medieval period and going into the more modern era, you have more of this use of hats, and so people start wearing hats, and so then Jews in Europe start wearing, this little, skull cap underneath the hat because it's easier to hide.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, in general, Jewish fashion was the same as the fashion of the cultures that surrounded them, or the culture they originated from. Polish Jews wore kaftans because Polish people wore kaftans. Of course, their garb became more conservative. Traditional Jews in the 18th and 19th century were behind the fashions of the Polish nobility who wore Western European fashions. So they still wore these kaftans and these streimels that the Polish used to wear in the 17th century. And it's talking about the keffiyeh. Here's Better Call Saul Bagman. When I went up to Tel Gezer, I just wore my shirt on my head and put water on it because you have to. It's not an Arab thing. It's not a Jewish thing. It's just survival.
It's a living thing.
Mm-hmm. And many people, of course, who are relatively secular in Tel Aviv, they wear keffiyeh as a fashion statement and sometimes as a political statement. Mm-hmm. Not everyone who is Israeli and in Israel supports the regime, and many of them are sympathetic to Palestinians. And that's one of the things I've been trying to do is encourage people in the regime, in Israel, to be like Schindlers, protect Palestinians, do what you can to protect civilians because of your privileged status. Schindler was able to get away with protecting so many Jews because he was a member of the Nazi Party,
Also, I mean, because of his wealth.
And his ostentatious wealth, which is always very handy when you are trying to protect someone from a genocide. Goodbye, Bagman. I think we're going to take a little break now and answer some questions because I have a headache. And we did one line of them. Are you able to look at the comments?
Yeah.
Are you able to put them up, or do I have to put them up?
You have to.
Okay. Which one do you want me to put up?
I don't know. Maybe just go through some of them.
We did the Alam questions already and the Roma questions. Pipes. Phallic worship.
Oh, yeah. I think that was in reference to the obelisk, maybe.
Yeah. So, without a doubt, there was a lot of phallic worship. The Canaanites were kind of crummy at art compared to the Egyptians, and they would copy a lot of the same themes. So one of the themes that the Egyptians would have in their scarabs is someone suckling from a cow, and it was clear in the Egyptian art that it was from a cow. When the Canaanites did, they were a little bit messy. It kind of looked like a kid was giving a blowjob to a bull.
Ugh.
And that's what kings put on their royal seals.
Something that's kind of interesting, kind of going to the obelisk. So maybe you could explain because you know much more about this. What is a mastaba?
A mastaba is the earlier type of tomb in Egypt before they kind of got their shit together to make big pyramids, which are just one mastaba on top of another. It's a raised platform.
Holy shit, that really connects because. So check this out. So you have the mastaba. Here, if you could just So the reason I connected this was because it's something that you erect. It's like a it's built basically. Mm-hmm. But I was connecting that to the concept of a matzeva in Hebrew, and I wouldn't be surprised if there is a connection in that, like, it got adopted into Semitic from the Egyptian term mastaba.
Well, I don't think mastaba is an ancient Egyptian term. I'm pretty sure it's just a modern Arabic term.
Oh, really?
We just refer to this phenomenon that they found. It doesn't strike me as Egyptian terminology.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. It's Arabic word for a bench of mud. That is Okay, this is interesting though, because it's the above ground structure has space for a small offering chapel equipped with a false door. Priests and family members brought food and other offerings for the soul, or ba, of the deceased. So the ba was in it, in the mastaba. Like, I feel, and this is just my intuition, I'm not saying this is the case. My intuition is probably that, okay, no, so it's saying the ancient Egyptian name was Perjet. But dang it, I was really hoping that there was like maybe mastaba was just like the Arabic term that was kind of put on top of this. But okay, never mind. But it is interesting though that a matseva is erected with, it's basically a headstone, which is interest or no, it's a sacred pillar. But I think, yeah, it can also be a headstone. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting. But I guess then, yeah, okay, that's weird. I guess there is no connection then.
Well, I mean, they buried dead people under those pillars in Gezer. Was the other thing I was thinking of related to that is that Egypt had a mortuary cult with a living, priesthood for dead pharaohs, but there were also priests who would be stealing from the dead pharaoh and making money on the side. And there were also pharaohs and family members of pharaohs that their kind of thing was restoring, the archaeological sites of their time. Chaim Waset, the son of Ramses II, his big MO was restoring the pyramids. And Thutmose IV, who was the father of Amenhotep III, his big thing was he had a dream and he would restore the Sphinx, which was much older than him. It was already ancient history by his time. People think this was like a long ago time, like an ancient society that was at the beginning of everything. But the late Bronze Age, they already were aware of history going back thousands of years before them. They were, from their perspective, a decadent modern society. Do you want to move on with the tier list, or do you want to let's see some more
comments?
I want to say something. It's more of a question. This one is kind of related to Akhenaten. Sweet, sweet love with Nefertiti and Nio, paradise, or war in Canaan. Well, the rest of his family was like itching for war. Amenhotep III was kind of pissed that there was no major war during his reign. He wanted to have a war. So when there was this little rebellion in Nubia, he made it out like it was the end of the world. And he was this great hero who vanquished his 2 tribes in Nubia.
Oh, wow. That totally doesn't sound like a current American politician at all.
He was a very big-headed pharaoh who really liked his ladies on the younger side, if you know what I mean.
So, echoing what I said before.
Yes, exactly. No, he's not like Bill Clinton at all.
No, Bill Clinton goes for people once they're 18.
The funny thing is he cheated on his wife with women who just look like his wife, which I don't know if that's insulting or complimentary, but it seems pointless.
Maybe it's somewhere in the middle. Maybe it's like, I find you beautiful, but I don't find you beautiful.
I see. That's reasonable. Yeah, I think the question of like modern day Lebanese people, especially Lebanese Christians, seem really whiny. Like, oh, we're the biggest victims of history. And yet, the Sabra and Shatila massacres kind of suggest that they're not always the victims of these Middle Eastern history as they like to claim to be.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. There is no such thing as someone that's always a victim or always a victimizer.
True. I mean, like when you have these atrocities, the atrocity is transmitted like an STD. It kind of begins, there was no justification in the world that justified what the Nazis did to the Jewish people. And I want to make this absolutely clear. But when they did that, they passed on this STD of atrocity to a lot of these early Zionists. They wanted revenge, but they couldn't have revenge against the Germans. Because the America and the British needed West Germany as a Cold War ally. And so they had to pass on their revenge. What are they going to do? The Palestinians. And they create this historiography, which the Mufti of Jerusalem is this great Nazi sympathizer when he was kind of just a schlub who got played by the Nazis.
Yeah, I mean, that being said, it's not like you didn't have issues before 45.
That's true. The Zionists were already pretty brutal before, 45. Of course, they're carrying on what happened with Russia. Russia, which was worse than Germany until the Holocaust. Russia was like the king of the anti-Semites until the Russian Revolution. And a lot of anti-Semites like to overemphasize the fact that Jewish people were involved in the Russian Revolution, but there was nothing unjustified about what the Jews were doing in the Russian Revolution as a part of the broader population of the Russian Empire. The Tsars were terrible, absolutely terrible. That's off topic. I don't think there's a lot of really pertinent questions. I think we just move on now. We move on to Hayasha Azi. Hayasha Azi is an interesting case. There's this powerful state to the east of the Hittites.
Oh, actually, wait. What about Soylent Purple?
Soylent Purple.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's just an opportunity to mention the purple trade.
The purple. That was one of the big things for the coastal cities. They had this seashell that they boil and they make dye out of. People think it was very unique to the Phoenician coast, like Lebanon, Syria, but actually it's found all over the Mediterranean. There's a lot of murex actually in Morocco, in Mogador particularly.
Interesting.
To bring it back to Morocco because that's my second country.
Have you heard of the people who claim that it was a drug?
Well, it stinks. There's a special smell for very, very rich people. Kind of people which signify their elite status almost with their smell because the purple stank. It smelled like rotten fish, You would smell them before you see them, and then you see them, it's very, very bright purple. Like you can't take a picture of it. It's the most bright purple you can imagine in person. It's unnaturally vibrant. And it kind of reminds me of those like schmucks who smoke cigars, like the Rush Limbaugh type of people, or the kind of people that Groucho Marx would satirize. The people, oh, I'm rich and I'm gonna smoke and smell bad in your face.
Yeah, and the cigar, it's wrapped in $100 bills.
Mm-hmm. That's what the purple kind of was. Purple was symbolic of wealth and power in the ancient world. And like they're saying, it's like born in the purple. That's like the ancient version of a silver spoon in the mouth.
It's also interesting because you have the purple and also the blue that was produced from the Chilazon or the Anhibima, but that it's so blue and purple from the same same snail same shell, and then you have the red, which was produced by the Kermes. Oh my god, what was it called? Basically, like it's the same concept as like cochineal, except cochineal's from the New World, whereas the Old World is they're on like I forget which trees. Is it bay laurel trees? Maybe I forget. Anyway, but that they have this like bright red. It's not blood, but it's used for making a red dye. And I've personally done this with cochineal out here in Arizona. And yes, like Barb said, it smells like death. I actually have a video of myself processing it. Like you can see the visceral disgust.
It probably smells worse than they did, which is probably why they wore it. You're not going to smell stinky peasants if you already smell like rotten fish or rotten bugs. Now we have. Let's move on to Hayasha Azi. So that's a big kingdom. There's actually two kingdoms put together, Hayasha and Azi. And they are kind of based around the two big lakes in modern-day Turkey, Lake Van and Lake Erzurum, if if I'm not mistaken. But they're kind of seen as the founding civilization, the earliest civilization at the base of Armenian culture. So, but they are objectively Hurrian at this time. Hurrians are a big deal. Where we got that? Hayashazi. You got beautiful lakes. Lake Van. It was a rich agricultural region. It was also subject to trade. There were fertile valleys bisected by mountain ranges, I think.
So
And it was the battleground between Mitanni and the Hittites when Hittites was losing. When the Hittites were winning, the battleground was Ishua and Alshe, which were closer vassals of the Mitanni. And eventually the Mitanni themselves, their heartland, was conquered and subjugated by the Hittites.
And so do we know where their capital was?
Not for certain. And at least I don't.
I have an idea.
To my knowledge.
Just take one out of the good old playbook. This was their capital. See, don't you see? You can see here. Here's the city. You just have to look close.
Mm-hmm. I think Hayashazi could be considered a pretty decent lesser king, and I think they're definitely stronger than Alashia. What do you think?
Well, what I will say for certain is this is an interesting way of spelling monastery. Monastiri.
Monastiri.
Surpharutiun Monastiri. But yeah, I mean, I'd have to say, honestly, I don't know enough about them, so I'm just going to guess maybe like vassal? Or would they be lesser king?
Well, they were able to sometimes, give some L's to the Hittites. I don't think they're as strong as Ahiawa. They're never referred to as a great king. The king of Hayashazi is never referred to as a great king. And in fact, sometimes they didn't have a king. A lot of times they had like an oligarchy or a republican system of like a council of elders. That was actually their typical political system. I think lesser king is a pretty safe bet for Hayashazi, in my opinion.
Wow, this is really flat, except for the mountains.
Well, there's no mountains there. It's a pretty big territory, actually. It goes all over eastern Anatolia. Anything to the east of the Hittites would have been in Hayashazi. Hayasha being in the northwest of that territory, and Azi being in the southeast.
What the heck?
They're kind of like around. Yes, it's an area that I'm not particularly experienced in. I'm interested in the Hurrians, but the Hurrians are kind of just like buried by history. They get forgotten a lot.
Oh, this is funny. I thought it said Van Valium, or the Valium Van or something.
Well, I guess let's move on because we've already done almost 2 hours, and we're not even halfway through our list. We have let's strike this one off. This is the Kassites, the Kassite Babylonians, Karduniash. That is So this is actually their site of Dur-Karagalzu. Karagalzu is one of their big kings. And after the dynasty founded by Hammurabi was destroyed by the Hittites, the city was sacked. The Kassites move in, and they also wipe the floor with the Sealand dynasty that's sort of based out of Essene, sort of by the Persian Gulf. And the Kassites are sort of strong for a while, but they're never like top-notch Babylon. They are mid at best as far as Babylon is concerned. They never reach the heights of Hammurabi or Nebuchadnezzar. But they do manage to secure a diplomatic alliance with Shupililiuma with their princess, Malignal or Malnikal, depending on the interpretation, who marries Shupililiuma, who divorces his first wife, sends her to Ahiawa, and then takes this new woman who all of her stepsons are bitching about. Mercilessly actually accuses her of sorcery, like the evil stepmother of Hittite politics from mysterious Kassites.
I like a cold examiner's comment. Bear people. I personally think it looks like man bear pig.
Yeah, it's meant to be a mastiff, man bear pig.
Uh,
Whoop.
was
So this is just Babylonia. You don't really need to show it. It's just like Babylonia. They have their own capital of Dur-Kurgalzu.
how do you spell it?
Dur.
Oh yeah, it's showing up now. It's in Baghdad.
It's near Baghdad. All these were kind of like in the same place. But the Kassites were not the big dynasty. I think they are a great king, but only just.
What the heck? Is this part of like? Is this the? Is this what is this?
This is a ziggurat.
But why does it look like it's a mountain?
Because time was not kind to it. That's what all ziggurats look like if they don't get restored. People will think that they're just a natural feature, but if you actually look at the bricks, they're man-made. We don't think of ziggurats as looking like that because usually when we see ziggurats, we see the restored versions, like the ziggurats of Ur or Chogazanba, where the government undertakes expensive restoration projects. Saddam Hussein was particularly fond of that.
So, wait, so it would have originally gone all the way up to the top and it would have been like stepped all the way there?
Probably even higher. That's just the core of what was left.
Wow.
I mean, it was a kingdom of Babylon. It just was the third best kingdom of Babylon after the Amorites are number 2, Chaldeans are number 1. Chilling with the Chaldeans.
It is kind of interesting though that like everybody, I feel like the focus on the Chaldeans so much has a lot to do with both the Chaldeans and the Kassites. I think has a lot to do, at least in the modern world, with probably the Hebrew Bible and the fact that people see, oh, Abraham was from Ur of the Chaldees, and so that end up kind of missing the fact that it's an anachronism.
Well, Chaldeans almost certainly come from what is referred to in late Bronze Age sources as sea land, sort of the Persian Gulf Coast. They're the marsh Arabs, essentially.
I thought Sealand was another one of those Micronesian places.
It is, but this is the Mesopotamian sea land, not to be confused with the wackadoo sea land out there in the ocean. That's actually not really a land, but it is on the sea. Yeah, I put them in Great King.
Yeah, I agree.
Now we have Kashgar.
Wait, I thought this was Tarhuntasa.
Tarhuntasa is. I gave a different one to Tarhuntasa. I think I made this one with the Luwian hieroglyphs. I made this one Tarhuntasa. This one could just as easily be Tarhuntasa, but I couldn't find a good piece of art from the Kashkins because they stink at art and everything. Let's look at what I put for the freaking Kashkins because they're just barbarian warriors of the north, and they also had like pork. They had a king at one point named Piapoli who got wiped out by Shupaliliuma.
Wait, so they had pork, and then the Karduniash had bears. So does that mean? And then they're both men. Is that how you get man bear pig?
Yeah, I guess. Although it's supposed to be a mastiff, but it's okay. A doggy.
Hey, mastiffs are the bear of the dog world.
That's true. Where do we put the Kashkins? Because they could trouble the Hittites, but there's no way they're great king status. I mean, they're not organized enough.
I'd say maybe in between lesser and vassal.
So probably the top of vassal or the bottom of lesser?
Bottom of lesser.
Although I still think when it comes to the military, they would beat Al-Shia. And they'd probably also beat Hayasha Azi as well, militarily, but their organization kind of stinks.
Yeah, you might be able to beat someone militarily, but if they can pay you something that makes it worth your while to not go after them, hey, that's a benefit.
So this one's Carchemish.
I like car commission because it sounds like car crash.
Well, it was kind of a car crash. Carchemish was originally like the number one urban center of the kingdom of Mitanni. But it got conquered by the Hittites, and a junior branch of the kingdom of the Hittites.
What did they do to it?
I'm guessing it's one of those sites that just ended up getting wrecked as a result of wars in that particular region.
Yeah, there's nowhere to do a street view.
Back to the story of Carchemish. So after they get conquered by Shupilulume, he puts his middle son, Piashili, sometimes as in charge of the city, and the descendants of Piashili continue ruling this city even after the Hittite Empire falls. So it's one of the last refuges of Hittite culture. They don't really have like a completely independent political system from the Hittites, but they are a secondary Hittite state that happens to be in Syria.
Oh wow! So their patron goddess was Kubaba.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
See if I can find my. And Carchemish is this really old Hurrian city. Like it goes back well past the Middle Bronze Age. Where is Carchemish? And they have a river.
Wait, I'm confused. What looks like Phoenix, Arizona?
Yeah, kind of. Carchemish, yeah, it was ruled by the Hittite king, son of the Hittite king, Piashili, but his father made him change his name to Shari Kushuk, which is a Hurrian name. So I put it down as Shari Kushuk.
Let's see. So, I just want to make sure that I have the right location. Okay, northern part of the region of Syria. Is this it? Because I feel like, yeah, that could be.
I think it's in the upper Euphrates.
Shit, I really hope that this isn't it because that's devastating. If that wait, Carchemish.
Unfortunately, a lot of sites in this particular part of the world were devastated by the ongoing war. There was the Russians bombing, there's the Islamic State, there's the Turkish state fighting the Kurds. I said Hurrians, but then I said the Kurds. Freudian slip. My Syrians in the comments are going to be pissed. They have a big beef with Kurds.
Do you know why Jews and Kurds have like this solidarity?
I'm guessing because they are just both kicked around a lot, I guess. I don't think Kurds have a complete solidarity. Certainly don't have a solidarity with Israel as far as I'm aware. I don't know. Kurds have been treated pretty nastily by different Arab rulers and by the Turks for sure. I think solidarity should be the default. We should ask, why do people not have solidarity, not why do people have solidarity?
That's a good point.
I think it's a better question to ask. Anyway, where do we put Carchemish?
Maybe like in between lesser and vassal.
High, lesser, or lower vassal? I mean, high vassal or lower lesser?
Honestly, I don't know. What do you think?
They're the exact opposite kind of as the Kashkans. So the Kashkans have a strong military, but Carchemish is this big urban center. This is the biggest urban center in the kingdom of Mitanni. I'm assuming I'm not certain if this was the case, but I think it is the case where like the crown prince of Mitanni would be given like the city of Carchemish, kind of like how the crown prince of England is the Prince of Wales.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably how their status was. It's bigger than the capital of Washu County or Taipei.
Was this connected to? Oh my god, what was I going to say? Was this connected to Hanigalbat?
Yeah, Honeygalbut is just another word for Mitanni, and they badly misinterpreted and butchered this kingdom with total warfare. They just conflated it with Assyria, but Honeygalbut is just Mitanni but Mitanni in Akkadian sources rather than Egyptian sources.
In Akkadian. Okay, interesting.
There are three names for Mitanni: Honeygalbut, Naharin, and Mitanni. So
wait, Naharim.
Yeah, the two rivers, Khabur and Euphrates.
Interesting. Wait, Khabur?
Yeah, the river Khabur. And we're not going to delve into etymology so much. This is a tier ranking video. Oh, and would you look at that? Egypt.
All praise the sun.
Egypt has to be a great king just by definition. It's the number one. Amenhotep had no real challenge to his rule when he was in charge. Kemet. Yeah. But then Akhenaten is a real fuck up. It gets all foobarred with him. So he is a real religious zealot, but he's kind of like a rationalist religious zealot. He doesn't believe in any anthropomorphic deities. He believes in the sun as we see the sun. So he's worshiping that version of the sun.
So he believes in a heliothorpic. Heliomorphic deity.
Yes. But this was a cult that wasn't invented by Akhenaten. People assume that he did. But the worship of the Aten was already prevalent in his father and grandfather. Amenhotep III and Thutmose IV also promoted the cult of the Aten. What Akhenaten did that was unique was he made himself the official representative of the god and made that god the only god that would be permitted.
Oh, what's that sound like?
Does sound a lot like Hezekiah and Josiah. He didn't necessarily believe that the Aten was the only god that existed, necessarily, but he would not brook any other cult centers existing outside of his in Akhenaten. But it was also kind of an egalitarian religion in terms of racial politics. He kind of accepted the Canaanites and the Nubians as being equals in the eyes of his one god, the Aten, which was something that was kind of unheard of. But at the same time, he was also really lazy, so he didn't really want to bother in the Levant very much. Everything went to shit under his rule. This whole Amarna letter is just everything going to shit because he only cares about what his cult is doing, not what the empire is doing.
Oh, wow. Doesn't that sound familiar?
And for all the talk about scootily pooping with his beautiful Nefertiti, he never put a son in her. A bunch of daughters, but no son. He ended up having his one son, Tutankhamun, with either one of his father's former Mitannian wives or his own sister. It's not really completely clear. That's a question for Egyptologists. I'm not an Egyptologist.
She is my wife. She is also my sister.
Yuck. Okay. I don't want to talk about the effects of incest long term, but they're not fun. And Akhenaten kind of had that Habsburg chin going on. I don't really want to show it. Everyone knows what Egypt looks like, so let's just
that Hattusaberg chin.
Definitely bigger than Arzawa, but and Karduniash, but they are no Hati. Hati is number one in this time. Okay, next one, Kizuwatna.
Why are his eyes so red? And who is that?
This is a cute little picture of Kumarbi. the Hittite the Hurrian father of gods and monsters. So he's the father of Teshup, but he's also the father of Ilukumi and all the other, monsters in the Hurrian pantheon. He's kind of like a titan in Greek mythology, and in fact, the Titanomachy and the Gigantomachy and all these monster battles in Greek mythology come from the Hurrians. And he's kind of a little cutie.
Is that a UFO next to him?
That's a sun disk or the morning star disk. It's just, a little thing that you can always put in the side.
So
Near Eastern is always included.
So you're telling me he's an alien? I'm joking.
Scully! I didn't watch that. Kizuwatna used to be really strong. It was the buffer state between the Hittites and the Mitanni, so both of them kind of wanted Kizuwatna to be strong, but it kind of had collapsed and was no longer a major player at all during this period, during the Amarna period. It was big in the 1400s and the 1500s, but by the 1300s, it's no one. Kizuwatna. So that's like in the Taurus Mountains.
Interesting. And then in Egyptian, it was called Kode.
Yeah, it's the land of Kode. They came back pretty quickly as a Neo-Hittite state in the Iron Age, but Kuet or Koda, depending on the sources, Kizuwatna really thrived after the fall of the Hittite Empire, but at this time, I put it in Vassal King. It's definitely bigger than these guys, though. But I don't know. I'll put it between Gezer, because Gezer had an independent foreign policy. Whereas we don't even have like a king who's recorded his name in this period. But it has a big territory. Using its influence to Tarhun Dorada, which has this great central location for fighting both in Anatolia and in Syria, which the Hittites had to do. They moved their capital from Khatusha to Tarhun Dorada later on under Muwatalli. Are you showing this sort of region?
Yeah, wait, where is it?
We're kind of like north of Cilicia. What they would have called in classical antiquity Isauria.
Like Isau.
Yeah. So we know about this Isauria, which is the last remnant of traditional Anatolian culture, even into the Christian age. There was a king named Zeno of Isauria of the Byzantine Empire who still had these associations with these ancient Anatolian cultures in late antiquity, which is a huge deal because for the most part, everything had become Hellenized and Christianized. It's a really unique part of Turkey, like the most backwards part in antiquity.
Interesting. Is there any connection to Catalhoyuk?
Probably. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these have cults that are adjacent to Çatalhöyük.
Interesting.
Okay. I am going to go back and move through. We have now Lucca. We're back onto... This is one of the few pieces of like really early Lycian art. This is probably based on an Iron Age sculpture. It kind of struck me as similar to the one of Shupiluluma II. The big bulging eyes and the same hairstyle. I did him as like a painting with some nice colors. And Lucca, that's the first hump. We were talking about Lycia before. It's one of the sea peoples. They were number one in piracy.
Oh, okay, that really makes sense because the whole narrative of Amalek is that they attack the Israelites right as they escape the Egyptians as they're crossing the sea. The question is, which sea? is it the Sea of Reeds, or is it referring to a sea, or rather the Great Sea? In that sense, kind of like, I mean, like, it's more so just the narrative that they're attacked by this quote unquote like roving band of pirates, for lack of a better term, but like land pirates instead of sea pirates.
Mhm.
And
Well,
so, yeah,
any pirate can be a land pirate just the same as a sea pirate. Most
yeah,
of the
that's
sea
right.
peoples were land powers, They just happened
Oh,
to come by the sea.
so
And they were defeated at sea, actually.
so Lycia is like around here, right?
That's kind of like around the hump.
The first or the second?
Yeah, the first hump. So one of their big cities was called Santhos. And you look in, there should be some like little bays and inlets and tiny islands that make it good for hiding as a pirate.
Oh yeah. I wonder if I'm able to.
Not quite as good as the Aegean coast, though. The Equesh were also fine pirates. The Equesh or Ahiawa, depending on what language you're using. The Equesh is the Egyptianized version of Ahiawa, probably.
Oh wow, this is beautiful. And there you can see the island over there. Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's totally a pirate haven. Well, I mean, I don't mean it is, but it totally could be.
Mm-hmm. Where do we put the Luca? Because I think they should be in Lesser King. They're not a vassal of anyone. I also think that Carchemish should be moved to Vassal King because they objectively were a vassal.
Yeah.
Maybe at the top of Vassal Kings because they perform pretty well, given that they are just a. Well, in Game of Thrones, they have the Karstarks that are from another line of the Stark family. It's kind of like that with the Hittites. There's no way Luca is a great king.
Wait, did you just say the Stark family?
Yeah, in Game of Thrones.
Oh, sorry. I don't know why the first thing I thought of was Iron Man.
You're the wrong kind of nerd for me. I'm the nerd that likes dragons and boobs. You're the kind of nerd that likes pew pew.
Hey, you don't know me that. No, it's literally just that I think the reason it came to mind is because of all that shit with Terrence Howard. I've just heard Iron Man referenced more recently. But no, I like Game of Thrones. I need to finish the series. I forget. I don't even remember where I am. Probably just have to start over.
I don't see Luca as being a great king, but it's not a vassal king. It never really kind of is on the top end of vassal kings if it's a vassal king. But in this period, I see lesser king, and at the bottom of lesser king as well.
I feel like Vassal King, like it's almost like it's kind of too specific. And again, like nothing wrong with the term, but I feel like it could be like vassal slash king,
Yeah,
or like a vassal and or king.
I think we should just sort of like take it in middle areas of strength. Yeah, I'll just put it kind of here. I'll put it ahead of Carchemish for sure. It's definitely ahead of all these Canaanites because it's a regional state of its own with its own identity that survived the Bronze Age collapse. And they're mentioned in the Trojan Wars. I mean, in the Trojan War narrative with Homer.
Oh, this was funny. What was it like Graham said? Oh, something's covering it. Dang it.
Graham.
Yeah, he said. Oh yeah, Cilicia, home of the pirates before Somalia.
Yep. Yeah, Cilicia at this time would have been called Kizuwatna. And part of it was also in what we'll talk about later called Mukish. And it wasn't really a big pirate haven at that time. They kind of absorbed some of that Luwian pirate culture later on, but originally they were kind of like Hurrian land pirates more than Luwian sea pirates.
It's funny when I hear land pirate, the first thing I think of is like those soft set people who they say, you know, my car is my ship, and you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I don't
No.
know, I just like a land ship.
Well, now we're
Ooh,
on to Megiddo, and Megiddo is a regional power in and of itself. One of the biggest strengths that Megiddo has in the late Bronze Age is, besides that, it has really good agricultural land in the Jezreel Valley, one of the best agricultural lands in the land of Palestine. Boopity
so
boopity boop.
what's your thought on the theory that the term Israel might actually have been a derivation of Jezreel?
It's possible, but I don't think so because I think it's very, very unlikely because the little prefix that the Egyptians put in their hieroglyphics in front of that word
Yeah.
was of a tribe, a people group, not a region.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, what's to say that the people group didn't come out of the region?
It's possible. And very much so that the Habiru activity were very, very much frequently in this region, in the Jezreel.
Yeah.
So
And
Labayu, the king of Shechem, did most of his fighting. He initially fought with Milkilu, but made an alliance with him. His big nemesis was Biridia, the king of Megiddo, and his brothers, Surata, king of Akko, and Yasdata, the king of Tanakh. And
yeah,
Labayu was able to kill and was able to kill Yasdata, king of Tanakh. But the strength of Megiddo, besides its agriculture, was also in its diplomacy. It was kind of able to wrangle his. Viridia was able to wrangle his brothers into being kings of other major states around there. Akko was very important, obviously, but it was under the jurisdiction of Megiddo. And Tanakh is just right next to Megiddo, but it was a big city, and it was a city of its own right. And he was able to wrangle this power. And if it wasn't for Labai, he probably would have continued his diplomatic expansion, kind of like his Habsburg strategy, marrying for power. He probably would have ended up taking over Akshap, which was ruled by Enderuda, and most likely he would have tried to somehow take over Ginti, which was ruled by Tagi. Perhaps that's the reason why Milkilu had some conflict with Birdi as well, because Ginti, where his father-in-law was ruling, was just right next to Megiddo, or not far from Megiddo, and the area controlled by Biridia.
So someone asked, what was it? Or no, a cult examiner asked, why the liar glyph?
So the use of the lyre comes from the ivory, plaque that they found in Megiddo, which features a lyre player, and the lyre from the Canaanites is therefore referred to as the lyre of Megiddo. And I thought, well, that's a very convenient symbol. And it kind of represents that the king of Megiddo had a more peaceful strategy. He wasn't afraid of war, but his expansion was kind of based more on diplomacy and marriage and economics than it was on outright military conquest.
So this is this is really interesting. So it's I know we're not doing etymology, but just real quick. So Megiddo, it's not the same root, but it does share the same similar letters as Migdal, which means tower, which is just kind of interesting because of how it was like a fortress city. But on top of that, so the root Magad, well, so on its own, Mag could be a soothsayer or magician, or technically a magian, but Magadu means be glorious or excel in glory. And then you also have a Magid, which is a storyteller. Now it's kind of interesting because people would tell stories to music in the ancient world. And I'm connecting things. I'm not saying that it's anything direct, but
I do think Megiddo was almost certainly stronger than Hazor in this time period, given that it exerted control over other regions in the Jezreel, and we don't really know much about Hazor exerting a lot of control. And I'm going to kind of demote these guys to mayors. I'm going to demote.
Don't you think Megiddo would have been a bit of a vassal?
Well, it's a vassal, but it's a mayor vassal. All these rulers were referred to as Chazanu, which means mayor. I think a Canaanite city has to really have a strong foreign policy of itself to justify it going to vassal king, like Amuru. Or I'm going to put Gezer here as well. So, I think Gezer is actually probably on a lower level than Megiddo. I also think that Byblos is probably on a lower level than Megiddo as well, in my opinion.
So this is really interesting. So you said Chazan or Hazan?
Hazanu.
With a ha or a ha?
Ha.
Interesting. Let me see what I can find. Because, and then is that with a z or a sa?
With a z, Zanu, or maybe Hajanu. I don't know. It depends on the dialect we're using. Mm-hmm. Let's not overdo it on the etymology. People find it really boring. At least if you're going to do it, talk about something silly while you do it.
Yeah.
Let's show Megiddo. Armageddon City. There were a lot of battles there.
Yep. And what was this? Wait, Graham, what do you mean is Idrimi a playable character? What are you talking about?
Yeah, Idrimi is the king of Alak, but he's about 100 years before this. We'll talk about his kingdom of Mukish that he founded. It's a big deal, but it's kind of losing power at this time. We'll talk about it later. In relation to the Odyssey. Odyssey.
I don't know why. Megiddo looks so small like this, but then again, there's also a drone shot.
I think a lot of people interpret the Phocaeans, which are mentioned in the Odyssey, as Phoenicians, but it's Phocaeans from Phocas. It's nothing to do with Phoenicians. They just assume they're Phoenicians because they're good sailors. Did I say boobs? I said boobs. Dragons and boobs. Game of Thrones. I say a lot naughtier words than boobs. Boobs. I didn't say boobs. I said boobs. Boobs. Well, let's get on with it. We have one more row to get through after this row. Mitanni. This is a complicated one.
Well, I mean, I want to just say my guess before we go into the details. I'm going to guess the Lesser King.
Yeah, like it would be of the Canaanite kingdoms. I don't know. I mean, they defeated Labayu, but they kind of fumbled him at the last minute. So
wait, Mitanni?
No. We're talking about Mitanni, or are we talking about Megiddo?
No, I thought we were talking about Mitanni. You just moved on to
Mitanni. Mitanni. It was a great king at the beginning of this period. Tushratta was treated by Amenhotep III as an equal. He sent his sister Giluhepa was sent to be the wife of the pharaoh, and then his daughter he sent to be the wife of the pharaoh.
Did he pull an Abraham?
No, but he did treat the king of Egypt like brothers. They were very close. But Akhenaten really didn't get on with him so much, and things really got bad for Mitanni very fast.
But did he get off with them?
Well, one of the things is the Mitanni wanted to have an Egyptian daughter sent to their kingdom. A lot of kingdoms wanted that. But Egypt, as a matter of a policy, never sent their princesses to marry anyone else besides the pharaoh.
Is that a common practice in that region?
No, it was quite the opposite. They were trying to assert themselves as better than everyone else.
So this is where the Israelites got that tradition from?
Most likely, yes. And there's many connections, I think, that show that there is a connection between, the this Jewish tradition, this Israelite tradition, and Egypt. It's one of many points of commonality. The
Oh,
the the reality of Israelites is they just borrow elite practice. That's what Jewish law is: elite practice imposed as law on a whole people.
there's a question from a Cold Examiner regarding Megiddo.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
Megiddo.
a really good question. What in the world? How is the place of Armageddon just a strong mayor? Help me make sense. Oh well.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about in the context of the Amarna letters, and it was a place of Armageddon because there's just a whole bunch of battles that happen there. There's the Battle of Megiddo, and then there's the Battle of Megiddo, and then there's the Battle of Megiddo. I mean, I should distinguish them. There's one in the 1400s BC between the Mitanni and their vassal of Kadesh and Egypt, and Mitanni loses. I'm not mad at. I won't be mad, but I'm just trying to get through it tonight. Okay, so and of course Egypt wins, and then there's another battle of Megiddo with the Assyrians and the Egyptians in 620, which is an apocalyptic battle from the perspective of the Hebrews, so they make it Armageddon. And then there's a battle in World War One. So,
Oh well, really? I don't know why I didn't know that. And then there's the battle that people are waiting to happen.
Yep.
Which, given the West's foreign policy, could very well happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, their foreign policy is influenced by religion. A lot of the people in positions of power in America are ignorant religious numbskulls who actually believe in this stuff and are working to make it happen. And they also believe in aliens, which is why we had a government hearing on aliens in the Congress, which was fun. That's the first time I actually watched a congressional hearing from start to finish. I really couldn't have enjoyed it. But it's sad. It's like, you know, the wackadoos have taken over. The lunatics took over the asylum. And the nuclear weapons.
And the nuclear weapons.
Of course. Okay, well, Mitanni. What is there to say about Mitanni? Like, out of the political vacuum from the Hittite sack of Aleppo and the destruction of the kingdom of Yamhad and Mari, they kind of fill that space in northern Mesopotamia and eastern Syria and southeastern Anatolia. And they absolutely, you know, are dominant in that region for a while. But then Hittites come back and Egypt comes in. And Mitanni is not centralized enough to be strong. They're loved by their vassals because they take a light hand. They don't usually commit a lot of atrocities. That's not really their MO. They more or less let their vassals do their own thing. And they're kind of proto-feudal. So they have like castles where they have lords. So the castle like Shuta and Kutmar. They also have walled cities like Carchemish, as I mentioned earlier, and Nuzi, Arabka. And they kind of let their vassals more or less do their own thing. And while they're great warriors and amazing charioteers, the best horsemen, they keep their horses. Like, if you look at the writings of Kikuli, their horse keeper, it's like even beyond what modern horse care is like for race horses. It's truly remarkable, the detail orientedness of these people in taking care of their horses. But Kikuli gets sent to Hati. He teaches them all their tricks. And to at the risk of making a horse pun, Mitanni is really a one-trick pony.
Wait, one-trick pony or one-trick horse?
Yeah, basically. But the horses back then were very tiny as well, so they look more like ponies. Wait, they would have been a great king at the beginning of this. They definitely would have been bigger than Karduniash or Kizuwatna. They could go to toe with Egypt in the 1400s, but they get vassalized by the end by the Hittites who invade Syria. I think the best they can hope for is Lesser King, really. But I would put them. Yeah, I think they're the top of Lesser King. Is that fair?
There's the Mittani,
Yeah, the Mitannians.
Lesser King. Yeah, I'd say so.
They're about the same level as Assyria. So Assyria is coming up, they're coming down. But we shouldn't diminish how great they were in the beginning of this period. They were equals with Egypt, which is saying a lot because Egypt was at its height at that time. Okay, now we have one more in this row. This one is Mukish.
Oh, also before I forget, wait. So Mittani, um, um, do we know what was their capital again?
Washukani, we've never found the remains of Washukani or Taite, which is their other capital. We have found Carchemish. We have found Nuzi, which has a chronicle which mentions it was like most of what we know about Mitanni comes from their vassals on the periphery, from Nuzi, which is in Mesopotamia, from Alalakh, which we're about to talk about, which is on the Hatay province of Turkey, sort of like Antioch, the area of Antioch, and we mainly don't. We're only recently excavating these Mitannian sites. The fact that they're so obscure kind of protected them from the desecration of the Islamic State. So they never were destroyed because they were still buried, you know.
Interesting.
But they're in this really chaotic region. They recently discovered a new Mitannian site, which was really cool because they found like painted walls. We do know that their elite may have been Indo-Aryan, and they had different Indo-Aryan deities like Mitra, Indra, Surya, Varuna in their names. But their the primary population was Hurrian.
Here, I think I might have found an estimation of where it was.
Yeah, sort of in that region called the Jazeera again.
Like here?
Yeah, sort of like to the west of Assyria, near the Euphrates, the northern portion of the Euphrates and the Khabar River.
Nara al Khabur.
Really, like that's gonna be a big archaeological bonanza when they actually start really looking at that region. Unfortunately, war. And unfortunately, terrorism, and also unfortunately, global geopolitics and proxy conflicts and all that.
Yeah. So sad.
It really is. I think the best thing the Mitanni did was hide. They hid their sites under the sand so no one blew it up.
Sand is a good insulator from extremist violence.
And they were a horse culture. I actually have a video on my channel, which is me dancing, and I talk about the history of Mitanni. If you want to, I can show that one video. It's about a minute. If you want to share it, YouTube. It's a cool one. Oh wow!
I think I think at some point you should do your Rabbi Hillel challenge, but do it for these different Amarna age cultures.
I'm gonna just send you the link, and you can put it on if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just put it in the comments. Actually, do you see it?
Yeah. You want me to pull it up?
Yeah, if you could pull it up and just show it, I'll put show you on the screen. Oop. It's pretty funny. It summarizes the history. Yeah. I started doing these dancing with the swords and the swords. Okay, that's enough of that. Yeah. I started doing these videos where I just do a sword dance, the music, and then it and like text for the history. That was me. That was me. I got in shape traveling to Morocco.
Probably
Okay,
it's probably all the water weight from sweating.
maybe. I drink a lot of water though. I don't drink water at home. Let's go into Mukish. So people talking about Idrimi of Alalak. That's in the Hatay province of today's Turkey. Really, really beautiful area. Like, oh my God, you won't believe how beautiful that area is.
Oh wow, you're right.
So green.
This is fucking beautiful.
I think one of the most beautiful places I've been in my whole life is Antakya in Turkey. Underrated. Oh my God, so underrated. Unless you're Christian, then you know about it, you know?
Oh, Ibiza was like a big holy see.
Yeah, it was a big historical site for Christianity, and they have the tomb of St. Mark there. My dad has a friend named Mark, but he's no saint. He always ogles much younger women when we walk by. And then a few religious Jews came by and he started messing with them. It was so funny.
Where was this?
In Tucson. Yeah, I think he has like Parkinson's. The one that when you get like up to that age, it makes you do really crazy impulsive things. And he kind of just he had money, you know, in his life. He had money, and he was handsome, so he got away with a lot of stuff. But now he's old and skinny and creepy and really tall. So, and I don't know. It's a weird thing.
Wait, so basically he's a Nephilim?
Yes, he's an Nephilim. Okay. Let's go on and talk about Mukish. So
Yeah.
Mukish, they inherit the mantle of Yamhad. They even have the Yamhad dynasty. So their last king, Ituradu, is a direct descendant of Yaramlim of Yamhad, which doesn't sound like a big deal to people, but it was a big deal back then. You know, Yaramlim was bigger than Hammurabi. People know about Hammurabi because his law code, but in his time, Yaramlim was much bigger than Hammurabi of Babylon. He was the main king of the time, and Mukish kind of inherited the mantle, and they controlled Aleppo and Barga, and the kingdom of New Hashe was kind of like a vassal of Mukish, and Mukish was kind of like a vassal of Mitanni. So there were like different layers, and then you'd have cities like Nia and Abzuia that were vassals of New Hashe. So there's different levels. But Syrian history is very complicated, especially in the late Bronze Age, because the paucity of sources, and then it's just neglected by historians in general. They don't talk about it. People love Palestine. They hate Syria.
Why do you think that is?
People are threatened by Syrians because Syrians are better than them. I'm just joking around. But Mukish, you know, that's the kingdom of Idrimi of Alalak after Yamhad was conquered by the Hittites. He flees to the kingdom ruled by the in Alalak, ruled by the cadet branch of the Yamhad royal family, and he usurps them. And the Yamhad royal family continues on for hundreds of years, and they get a lot of their power back. But the Hittites wipe the floor with them. And most of their territory goes to Ugarit. So Ugarit becomes the hegemon of North Syria at this time, and the heirs of Aleppo.
Wow, so this is like right on the border with Syria.
Yeah, it's just north of Mount Zapan. So really culturally, historically significant, especially for the Hadad cult, which is the big cult of the late Bronze Age. For Egyptians and Hittites, They take this cult that's the combination of traditional Canaanite Baal worship with Akkadian and Hurrian influences. This becomes the universal religion, which is why they call any kind of paganism in the Bible, they call it Baal worship. Because Baal worship is the universal paganism.
Well, I mean, what's even the point in saying pagan? It's almost like it's the default at the time.
In the Near East, certainly all of it is related to Baal, Hadad. And Zeus. Zeus is kind of like a version of Teshub or Hadad. Or Thor is a version of Teshub and Hadad. It's the universal thunder god.
Interesting. I wonder what's on the top of Saphon. Is this Baal's house?
Wow, you found Baal's house? I never thought of looking at it on Google Maps. Wow. Neat. Because I actually went there and I saw it, when I was in Turkey. I wasn't supposed to talk about that. Let's move on. Where do we put Mukesh?
Maybe like a vassal king?
Do we put it ahead of Luca or behind Luca?
I'd say probably maybe ahead, but like almost on equal footing.
And relative to Carchemish?
Maybe
after on the rise.
So maybe
collapses.
Yeah, so put it after.
Yeah, okay.
And then Occult Examiner asked, so is that on top of a mountain? Yeah, it's the top of Mount Sappho, and it's also called Mount Calis.
Mount Cassius? There's like a name in every different language. So it's Jebel Akra in Arabic, Mount Cassius in Greek, Mount Kasi in Hazi in Hurrian. Because they also believe.
It's Saphon.
Yeah, Zapon. It's the universal center of the universal god, Baal Hadad. All praise Baal. And I'm not being sarcastic, I'm literal with that. We got through another line. Let's talk about. Why not talk about that? I have some secrets about my religion that I don't talk publicly until I'm ready. Yeah, it's around there. The border between modern-day Turkey and Syria. Border being Barabo.
Also, I do kind of. I'm just going to look this up real quick. I wonder if there's any connection between the name or do we know what language Alalach is?
I'm guessing it's either. It strikes me as a Semitic name, but it may also be a Hurrian name. I really don't know. I'm not an etymology guy. I'm not a language guy. I'm a politics, warfare, and religion guy.
Yeah, like just what strikes me is that it might have some connection to to Al or Il. Anyway, so what's up next?
Oh, yeah. Let's just get a move on, as you say.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna talk about Nukashe. So Nukashe was one of the vassals of Mukesh that kind of asserted its independence during the collapse that was coming from the Hittite invasion, but it didn't last very long before they got kicked down by the Hittites again. They had ties to Katna. In fact, Katna was previously a vassal of Nukashe, and its royal family was related to the royal family of Nukashe. Its capital was Ukalzat. There's an archaeological site that may be Ukalzat. I think it was called Khan Nukhani or something crazy like that. Don't look it up. It's nothing impressive. Farkhani or something. It's not a really neat place. It's just basically it ruled over all the areas of Syria between Katna and Aleppo. And their king Sharupshi was defeated and fled from the king of the Hittites and was betrayed by his servant Takib-Shari, who was made king of this region by the king of the Hittites. They are not really that amazing. They look strong on paper with their territory, but it's very ephemeral. And they don't make a big impact on history. They're just one of those Yamhad successor states, mainly in the region called Barga.
Interesting. So, why is it that Damascus is the capital of Syria when really the heartland of Syria seems to be more up in the north?
Well, Syria isn't really like one country. Syria is kind of like one country, but it's kind of like also multiple countries. If you look at the different regional identities, there are other regions that are diverse from each other as Lebanon is from the rest of Syria. The northwest is a very distinct region and kind of similar to Lebanon.
Is that the Syrian part?
That's the part like Latakia. That's more Shia dominated. And then there's the north, which is like Aleppo, which borders on with Turkey and has similarities with the Arab cultures you find in Turkey. And then you have Damascus, which borders with Palestine and with Jordan and has some of that influence there. And then there's the whole Orontes River Valley, which is its own thing and one of those great centers, River Valley civilization. With the whole headwaters of it just to the east, with these little tributaries that feed into the Orontes, which where Katna is. So each of these have their own like little regional identities in antiquity and today. Syria is very diverse. And because Syria is diverse and complicated culturally, because of its geography, that may be one of the reasons why Syria is so neglected when we're trying to present a simplified study of the Middle East. It's very dense with meat. They got the shawarma.
The shawarma, you said?
Yeah, it's that's where the meat is of Near Eastern history. Is in Syria, in medieval times, in modern times, and in antiquity. Syria is really like in the middle of everything. Every cultural influence plays into Syria. So Katana, you have these murals that have Aegean artists, and they have the Aegean trade from the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. But they also have ties with Anatolia in Syria, and they have ties with the Egyptians in Syria, and they have ties with Mesopotamia in Syria. Syria is in the middle of the world. It's the cradle of civilization and like the middle of everything going on. It's a big clusterfuck. Even then, civilized, wealthy border region that also was filled with the greatest savagery of war. And that's not really changed throughout human history. Where do we put Nuhashe? I don't think they're a strong mayor, actually. I'll put them above Anishasi for sure.
But what was it? Dang it, I don't remember what I was going to say now. Whatever. So what's the next place?
Next place we have my favorite place, Kadesh. Talking about being in the center of everything, Kadesh is right in the center of the Levant in terms of geopolitics. The border between Egypt and these other empires, Mitanni and the Hittites, was traditionally at the Orontes River. And right in the middle of the Orontes River, almost on an island, and it could be made into an island, was the city of Kadesh. And there were always battles in Kadesh, back and forth, back and forth. The Hittites, the Mitanni, the Egyptians, all struggling for Kadesh. Yet Kadesh managed to assert an independent foreign policy under all of its rulers. Under Sutarna, who's basically started the beef between Egypt and the Hittites, with Darusha, who started the beef between the Egyptians and the Mitanni, and he started the beef, and then like Takama, who manages to assert control over the surrounding region as a vassal of the Hittites, and playing the sides against each other, and Ari Teshub, who kind of switched sides and back and forth, and then Nikmadu, who is the king of Kadesh during the Battle of Kadesh, who maintains control even though his overlord is in his city. You know, he still manages to have an independent foreign policy in the midst of this absolutely apocalyptic sized battle. Kadesh is pretty awesome on its own right.
And it shares a root with the term for holy.
Yep. Although there were lots of Kadeshes. This is the Kadesh on the Orontes. There's also the Kadesh that's Barnea, which is in the south in the Negev. And then there's the Kadesh that's by the Galilee. This is the big Kadesh.
So also, before we forget, Graham mentioned something about Damascus.
Damascus. Yes. Yeah, Damascus was a really big deal as well. It only got bigger as the Iron Age happened. They survived the Bronze Age collapse and only got stronger. And this combination of Hurrian and Amorite/Canaanite culture created the Aramean culture as we understand it, which still exists today. Where do we put Kadesh?
Um,
I'm going to say that they're kind of on the same level almost as Amuru. Are they bigger than... Yeah, they're definitely bigger than Kizuwata.
I think.
What do you think?
I think they're probably comparable to Alashia.
Alashia. Where do we... Wow. Alashia is all the way up here. So are they bigger than Kashka? Certainly more organized.
Yeah, weren't the Kashka mainly invaders?
They were invaders. But like the Kadesh was seen as being a credible threat to invade Egypt like the Hyksos. So, yeah, but I don't know. I am personally biased, but I'll put Kadesh in Lesser King. They're definitely not great kings, especially not if Mitanni is in a Lesser King, but Kadesh is really quite strong given its situation. Continuing in the Orontes basin, we have Katna. And Katna is one of the older cities in this region. It was the big rival of Yamhad, and it became allies with the old Assyrians. The old king of Katna sent his daughter Beltum to marry the fuck-up son of Assyria, Yahdunlim. Not Yahdunlim. Yahdunlim was a different one. Yasma'ada. He sent his he sent his daughter to marry the fuck-up son of the king of Assyria, Yasma'ada, and he was so whiny, actually, about everything. But Katna survived and was not conquered by the Hittites at that time. It survived the Middle Bronze Age collapse into the Late Bronze Age. But it wasn't going to stave off the Hittites forever. And actually, one of the big subjects of my second book, Hail Like the Sun, is about the fall of Katna. They get sacked by the Hittites in the 300s. And they never recover, really. What do you think? Where does Katna go?
Maybe like strong mayor.
Mm-hmm. Like Akizi, the king of Katna, is actually pretty strong.
Oh,
but by his own right. But he's a strong mayor, and he's a strong mayor in the Mitanni Empire. Yeah, I can see that. Next, Shechem.
Oh, real quick, I'm just trying to find right here. I think I found it. Here, this is where Katna is. Wait, where is the directions? Here. roughly. Oh yeah, here.
Yeah, Katna was one of those great archaeological sites that they didn't know existed in Syria before they started excavating.
But yeah, you can see they have the same pixelation. I hear that they have that the Israeli government has over the entire region, Israel Palestine.
Yeah, a lot of these pictures that you'll find are about 10 years old for these archaeological sites. Syria is just one of those countries that's demonized in the Western media.
Well, I mean, well, yeah, the media demonizes the entire people, but really what should be demonized is their government.
Well, like it's an awkward situation because people don't think about what was going on in Syria before the Assads took control. It was like a new president every week. They kept murdering each other. It took an absolute tyrant like Hafez al-Assad to maintain stability and control in the region. And under the Assads, Hafez and Bashar, Syria became the most prosperous and balanced Arab states in that region. So it's a double-edged sword.
I mean, isn't that what I? That's the reason why so many people are susceptible to fascism, because it's like, oh, things seem better now, but the question is, what are the costs?
It's a little bit like that, but a little bit not like that because the Assads are not complete fascists. I can say that they do have an authoritarian government, but they do more for the people than fascists do. They had a social safety net, and Syria was one of the freest countries in the Middle East under the Assads, especially compared to the traditional monarchies. What Baathism is kind of confusing because you can't really put your finger down on what it is. It's ambiguous and vague. But it has its socialist elements, its national elements. It has fascist elements, I'll grant. But it also delivers on promises of stability for decades that just simply couldn't happen under liberalism in Syria. Syria is one of those countries that kind of get defended by the far left and the far right, but no one in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know,
but Syria is gorgeous. Let's be honest.
yeah, definitely the people, the land, the language, the culture.
And that's the whole thing for history. Like Syrians were the initial victims of anti-Semitism. You can look at what was written about Syrians in juvenile satires, and you might as well be speaking, in the present day.
Wait,
People shit talking Jews or shit talking Arabs.
Well, who wrote this? When?
Juvenal, the Roman satirist.
So I mean, it's also important to keep in mind that when you're getting to the Roman era, even Greek Roman era, they tend to until you really get the establishment of the Jewish religion properly. They tend to just refer to people from Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Syria. They kind of just refer to them all as Syrian. So that is one thing to keep in mind. That it kind of, almost in a sense, Syria was used to refer to the land in a way that eventually Canaan kind of referred to the entire coast, but before then it was called Syria.
And frankly, you could call the whole region Greater Syria now. The native population all has cultural similarities with Syria, and there's about as much diversity within Syria itself as within the whole Levant. Well, we're going to the next one. We're going to Shechem, right? Shechem, well, that's a big deal. Shechem is a big deal. For those of you who are interested in Bible stuff, the early Israelites are all based around Shechem. It's actually the center of the first cult center of the Israelites. But Labayu, the historical figure of Labayu, was a huge thorn in the side for the Egyptians. he had the disadvantage of leading his rebellion on the last years of Amenhotep III, the last years where Egypt was still kind of in control of things. If he had waited for a few more years, his rebellion might have done a lot better. But his legacy was very prominent. He stirred the pot. And his sons were at the forefront of leading Canaanite independence, particularly against the vassal kings, against the loyal vassal kings, and taking revenge on the killers of Labayu. So I'll sort of take like Pella and Ashtartu, the cities ruled by the sons of Labayu, as a part of the Shechem unit, because Shechem is destroyed by the Egyptians. Spoiler. But they're able to really like exert control over a wide region and push into all over southern Canaan, like in the region of Palestine. The modern day Tel Balata in the environs of Nablus. You can walk from central Nablus to Tel Balata without losing sight of buildings. It's the easiest archaeological site to get to in all of Palestine, in my opinion. Very comfortable place to visit, especially after Telgesser. Like, oh, Shechem is easy.
How do you spell Tel Balata?
TEL space BALATA.
Oh yeah, I see. Oh wow, you're right.
It's just right in the middle of a suburb, surrounded by houses on all sides.
That's honestly kind of eerie. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And of course, a lot of far-right Israeli leaders are really pushing to kind of push into that particular region of the West Bank because it's culturally significant to the story of the Israelites. But there's really no connection between these. There's a very vague connection between the Israelites and the modern Jewish people. But they play up because of the biblical account features the harmonization of Judahite accounts and Israelite accounts. But they're really two separate things. And Shechem, the real descendants of the Israelites are, apart from Palestinian people more generally, particularly the Samaritan community that lives on Mount Gerizim to this day, who love to make their own wine and arak and get wasted.
But yeah, do you think this is in Palestinian Nablus, or do you think this is the settlers?
Well, the troops keep moving through Nablus and murdering people left, right, and center. Men, women, children. This was going on when I was there. They were moving troops in. I went with a guy, and he sort of showed me, oh, this is where these people were murdered by the regime. There was these people were murdered by the regime. And, like, this was 2 months before October, so it's a really messed up situation, and I only put the blame on Israel and Netanyahu purposely provoking an attack. Particularly when we talk about Gina, which is actually relevant to the story of Labayu and Shechem, because that's where Labayu was killed. The modern-day city of Jenin is located on the ancient town of Gina. And there's a genocide going on. There's like shootings of innocent people left, right, and center in Jenin the month before I go there, and it's carrying on when I'm there. I'm like, can I go to Jenin? Is it too dangerous? And like, yeah, you're okay. You're American. Nothing's going to happen to you. They're probably basically right. But this was when I was there. The Israelis were massacring Palestinians in August and July in Jenin. I actually wrote a script for a video, but I never recorded and never put it out there because I had this rule on my channel that I wouldn't get political. But going there, I couldn't keep silent anymore. It's not just going to be about history. It has to be about politics, too. That's the Kohan Koletz thing now. So where do we put Shechem?
Maybe like vassal or in between that and minor.
I definitely put them ahead of Megiddo, even though Megiddo kind of defeated them. They're definitely stronger than about the same level as Katna, because Katna falls, but so does Shechem. You want to put them in between Megiddo and Katna? Definitely stronger than Hazor. Definitely stronger than Gezer and Megiddo and Byblos. I could even see them as being stronger than Katna. I'll put them just behind Kizuwatna. Labayu and his successors were able to establish an independent monarchy, in my opinion. Now, I think we're on Sidon. There's not much to say about the history of Sidon in this period. It was kind of like a secondary Canaanite city. They had to deal with raids by the Habiru, and they were part of the conspiracy against Ribhada, which ended up murdering his family along with the ruler of Tyre, who may have been married into Ribhada's family. All of these cities kind of conspired with Amuru. I can't really say much more than that. I would say they'd have to be at the end of strong mare or the top of weak mare, probably. Yeah, no, they're definitely smaller than Nuhashe.
It's worth mentioning that the name is likely derived from the root, which has to do with fishing, like or hunting. What was it? Oh my god, how am I? The root sayad, which means like to hunt game, or also it could be to fish. And so Sidon probably means fishery.
They're definitely stronger than Anishasi, but only just. And Tyre, they're basically, I think, in the same boat as Sidon in this period. They have the advantage of being on an island that keeps them protected from being invaded. But if I'm not mistaken, at this point of settlement, the Tyre that we know, the Tyre was Ushu, old Tyre, which was on the mainland. So nothing particularly special about Tyre in this period. Their king was murdered as a part of the Amorite conspiracy against Ribhada.
Wait, we're already on Tyre?
Yeah, we're already on Tyre. There's not much to say.
Yeah, did you show Sidon though?
Yeah, let's show Sidon.
So this is Tsirai Island, which is was this the old island, or like do you know about this? I mean, like obviously you know about the whole thing with the island that was turned into the city with Alexander, but where was that?
So I think we're talking about Tyre. You're talking about Tyre where they made the island into a peninsula.
Oh, you're right. Sorry, I'm like kind of yeah. Okay, so but yeah, so that was Sidon, and then this is Tyre, and you can see that this is the part that was added on. This was the island.
Yeah. So Tyre, at that time, actually was on the mainland, not on the island. But they moved to the island during the late Bronze Age collapse because it was more defensible. And it was very difficult to conquer them because they were on this little island. But Alexander managed to do it, which, of course, the Christians point to as a fulfillment of the prophecy of Daniel, as if these stories weren't already written in the Hellenistic period when it had already happened. So it's very easy to make a prophecy about things that already happened.
Wait, you're telling me that people can't go back in time?
Unfortunately, people can't go back in time.
Ooh. Wait, this is a hippodrome.
Yeah. So Sidon was a big site under the Persians. One of the biggest Phoenician cities under the Persians. Oh. That's actually... Tyre was the biggest one in the Iron Age. Sidon was the biggest one under the Persians. And the Sidonians helped Alexander conquer Tyre. They gave him ships. No solidarity between Phoenicians, I guess. In a lot of cases, people hated the guy from the town next door more than the foreign invader. You kind of see the same thing with how the Samaritans and the Jews respectively reacted to Alexander the Great.
What? Do they turn on each other?
So, like, the Samaritans initially gave the cold shoulder to Alexander, but the Jews welcomed him, and their high priest came in and just said, "Oh, we're gonna give you troops. We're gonna be really nice to you. We're gonna give you." And Alexander rewarded the Jews, and the Samaritans got jealous. They came at the last minute to send troops. So the Samaritans get punished. The Jews get rewarded. And Alexander gives dispensations to the Jews for their Sabbath. The Samaritans don't get it. And the Jews get dominion over Samaritan territory. And this conflict between Jews and Samaritans really, really goes back not just to Ezra, where he's trying to wipe out the worship at Mount Gerizim, but particularly during the time of Alexander, or in the post-Alexander period, where there's this rivalry between Samaritans and Jews. And obviously the Jews win out because there are millions of Jews. The number of Jews are measured in the millions. The number of Samaritans are measured in the thousands, if that. No. Let's talk about. Oh, I'm getting sleepy. I didn't have my dinner. We have a few more to do. Where do we put Tyre? I say I put it ahead of Sidon.
I would probably put it as a vassal king.
Really? In the late Bronze Age?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're right. I might be thinking later. Strong mayor, maybe?
I'm going to put them weaker than Hazor, but stronger than Nuhashe, I guess. We kind of unfairly harsh on them. It's not that just because they had a conspiracy happen in their midst doesn't mean that they're weak. Then there's the Tarhundarada, which became the capital of the Hittites when they realized all their stuff was happening in Syria, not Anatolia. But it was the territory that Shuppiluliuma gave to his second eldest son, Telepinu, as high priest of Tarhuntash. It was a big cult center for the Hittites. And it's on a very flat land, really near the modern-day city of Kayseri in Turkey. It didn't really have an independent foreign policy at this time. And it didn't really have a king. I would give him a strong mayor for Tarhundarada. Or Tarhuntasha. Excuse me, Tarhuntasha.
What's the modern day area you said?
So maybe around Kayseri.
How do you spell that?
I think it's Kayseri.
Oh yeah, I see.
So sort of that geographical area. You also have those heads. There's it's sort of like right in the midst of Cappadocia. So you can see those Cappadocian mounds and the plains of Cappadocia. Very interesting geography. Good for chariots, but also good for defense because they also have those mountains that you can hide in. They have those cave dwellings that can show Gurame.
One of the theories I've heard is that some of these ideas of the underworld might have to do with underground networks in Anatolia.
Probably. This whole area of Hurrian influence was hugely influential on the West and the Middle East. The Hurrians are the unsung historians of the unsung protagonists of ancient history, especially in mythology. Hurrians are a big deal. But kind of like Shakespeare and Citizen Kane don't seem as special because everything they innovated just became normal. But they invented it. So that's kind of how the Hurrians were. I put Tarhundarada ahead of these Canaanite states.
Oh, you still have it on the Google Earth.
Oh, whoopsie doopsie. Let's move over these. Move over, Canaanites. It's time for Tarhundaradu. It's not really a mayor, it's a priest, a high priest, but Telepinu was like a powerful high priest. He was a true son of Shupiluluma. Not as strong as Piashili, but stronger than Arnuwanda, who was the eldest. Next we have Ugarit. Everyone loves Ugarit. Oop. So Ugarit kind of goes from being politically irrelevant to the big guy, the big metropolitan, cosmopolitan hub of the Near East. They take all these customs, they're really heirs of Aleppo in terms of their religious custom, but they develop it further, the philosophical elements, moral elements, and the diplomacy of Nikmadu II is absolutely brilliant. He plays the kings of the Hittites and the Egyptians like a fiddle. And you know how I told you earlier about how the Egyptians would never send a daughter to any other king? Well, there's one exception to that. Akhenaten sent his daughter, it's not daughter, his sister, perhaps Nebeta, to the king of Ugarit, Nekmadu II, which was practically unheard of. Wow, neat. I never seen this view of Ugarit before.
Yeah, it is from, it looks like inside some sort of tomb.
Mm-hmm. Ugarit was kind of an Egyptianizing Phoenician state, but it's also kind of a Huronizing Phoenician state, which is kind of also a Hittiteizing. And it also was the center of its own distinctly Semitic, Canaanite, Amorite culture, which made it the heir to Aleppo. It's the center of everything. It's the center of the world, culturally speaking. While Kadesh is strategically the center of the world, militarily the center of the world, Ugarit is culturally the center of the late Bronze Age. It's the crossroads of the ancient Near East. And it was also politically and militarily strong. It was able to take control of the territories formerly held by Mukish, playing its game with the Hittite king. But it was still able to maintain good relations with Egypt, even despite all that, because it was so important for trade. It was just an absolutely brilliant game played by Nikmadu II. You can't exaggerate, how impressive Nikmadu II was. He kind of is the exemplary Canaanite king throughout history, given how he kind of built the Ugaritic state from nothing.
A real rags to riches story.
Well, it was still, even he was like the wealthy king of a wealthy Canaanite state. It's riches to even more riches, but you take what you can get in the ancient Near East. There's no way he's a great king.
Maybe a lesser?
He's definitely a lesser king. Even though he is a vassal of the Hittites, he's not really a vassal of the Hittites. He's playing the Hittites.
The vassals are, it's like he has vassals that are vassals to him, and he's a vassal to the Hittites.
Yeah. But he doesn't really do what the Hittites tell him. He does his own thing. And also, he married one of his sons to the daughter of the king of the Hittites. Or the king of Ugarit married one of his sons to the daughter of the king of the Hittites, and another to the daughter of the king of the Amuru. And maintained enough independence, that they could kind of dictate how a divorce would go in their case. I don't know. Ugarit is amazingly overpowered for this time period.
Yeah, but then they eventually they kind of just they're one of the first cities to follow the Sea Peoples later on, right?
Yeah, because their fleet is a way helping the Hittites. But this is in the 1200s. In the 1300s, they're really coming into their own. I definitely put them ahead of Al-Ashia. They could, if they wanted to, they could bully Al-Ashia. I also put them ahead of Hayasha Azi. In fact, I think I'll just
Oh,
put them right behind Elam as the
also,
highest rated Canaanite city state.
have you ever heard of this?
Ugarit soda?
Ugarit Cola.
No, never heard of it.
Yeah,
But
it's a Syrian brand.
Ugarit is a source of Syrian pride. They have the earliest source of recorded music. They have the earliest recorded alphabet that we've deciphered. They are a huge deal. Ugarit deserves all the praise it gets and more. They're a big deal. We still have three more to get through.
All right.
We have Damascus and
Dimash.
Damascus. Mm-hmm. Another one that's mentioned in Kart Kadesh. For those of you who want to watch my cringy teenage Shakespearean movie, Upu. The region is called Upu. The capital is Damascus. A combination of Hurrian and Canaanite culture. They have good chariots. They fight with the sons of Labayu. They support Egypt. Their king is one of like the youngest sons of the kings of Mitanni, who kind of strikes out on his own in the Egyptian Empire to get away from the civil war in Mitanni, because Mitanni is always filled with civil war. That's kind of a feature of them. He does quite well
Oh,
for himself.
wait, is Mount Cassion, is that connected to like Mount Cassius?
I don't know.
That'd be interesting to look up sometime. So, do it is like Damascus is the city center, like where the oldest parts are, or what's up with that?
I can't say because if there were ruins from this period, they're buried deep under human habitation. There's no excavations going on there. Unless they find it passively, there's not going to be any archaeological survey on the biggest city and the capital of Syria.
Yeah, or it's probably also one of the biggest cities in the Levant, right?
Probably the biggest city in the Levant, I would think. I don't know if they're probably bigger than Beirut and Jerusalem. Damascus is not big though in this time period. It's significant for controlling the trade that goes to Mesopotamia from Egypt and the diplomacy that goes through there. But it's not a major city in this time. It doesn't really come into its own until the Iron Age. Yet it still has enough of its power on its own. I put it in strong mare. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd say like higher end of the strong mare.
I don't think I could justify putting it above Gezer, though.
Oh no, not above Gezer.
But above Hazor
Oh,
for
also,
sure.
you're not sharing that screen.
Oh, so I put it above Byblos as well. Below Gezer, but above Byblos.
Wait,
In the
wait,
late Bronze Age.
wait. Is it the blue and yellow one?
The blue and yellow one is Byblos with
Oh,
Biblian syllabary, which has not been deciphered even till today.
wait. They don't. Wait. Wait. I forget. What's the syllabary?
It's a writing system based on syllables. And there's the syllabary from Damascus, and we haven't deciphered it.
Is there any thought that it could be connected to the Semitic writing script?
Yes, of course. That would be the first thing they would think of. Unfortunately, they haven't figured it out. It definitely comes from hieroglyphics in some fashion, but no one has cracked it yet. It's like the Indus Valley script and the Minoan language. No one's cracked it. Okay, Jerusalem,
Urushalim.
Urushalim, Jerusalem, beep 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 boo boo. Ah, walabi kamagugabalo. Yeah, well, Abdi Heba is the king of Jerusalem, or rather the mayor. He refuses to identify as a king. He absolutely kowtows in his writing to the rule of Egypt. What is he actually doing in the background? He's using his Habiru to kind of bully other local leaders like Shuardata of Gath and the like. And he becomes a big rival of Milkilu and Labayu. And he seems to have survived their rampage and kind of did his own thing, kind of copying them. Jerusalem kind of has this reputation of being like the little brother of Shechem. And I feel like it's only fair to kind of put them kind of behind Shechem.
Yeah.
Vassal king, though, no. Definitely a mayor. I think we should move higher to weak mayor.
Oh, this is so freaking eerie. I remember being on, I think it was this very, yeah, I remember being on this very roof. I remember I pulled out my packs. I was puffing on my packs, enjoying some vaporized cannabis. The was actually in Israel when I first started using it. It's also what got me interested in religious studies and anthropology. But yeah, this is one of. I mean, like I know it's not one of the biggest or most magnificent cities in the world, but it's still one of my favorites.
For me, I have a complicated feeling about it. I think it's highly overrated, personally, because I hate the bus drivers. The bus drivers are absolute terrorists. But I did meet one of my dearest friends in the whole world when I was in Jerusalem, and she absolutely treated me like a king. Like, she paid for everything. She took me to breakfast and to dinner in an actual Arab place just outside of the occupied part of the city. And when I was there, I was actually staying in an illegal settlement with an American woman, a preschool teacher, who had come to that occupied territory. And obviously, we had interesting discussions, you know. But she gave me a good review on TripAdvisor, even though I was bad talking Israel to her, you know, because I understood how to clean my room. The normal guests could not handle that. And I didn't put, you know, the trash in her dog's dog food.
What?
I was talking about the American woman I stayed with when I was in Jerusalem.
No, but wait, is that something that people do?
There was a container that looked like a trash can, but actually had her dog food in it. So previous guests had put their trash in there. But I noticed that there was dog food in there, so I didn't put my trash in there.
Ah.
So she gave me a good review on Airbnb as a guest.
Let's see if I can. Yeah, so this is interesting. So this is on the Mount of Olives, and then you can see what's probably a group of Christians over here. And it's interesting. I guess this guy had no issue with his face being there, but these guys didn't like it. And they're overlooking the city.
It's a nice view. It's a beautiful view. But I wouldn't want to live there. Too hot, too chaotic, not my bag.
Yeah, I think you'd go crazy eventually.
I like Nablus.
You like the Big Brother, huh?
Yeah.
So,
but to be fair, I didn't like Ramallah either. So
I forget what was Ramallah called before Ramallah.
I have no idea. I don't think it was a big site in the Bronze Age. And my expertise is on the Bronze Age. We still have one more to do, and this is the one for all those fanboys out there.
Wait, can I guess?
Guess which one it is.
I'm probably going to need a hint.
Well, what's the Bronze Age city that everyone knows about, but doesn't know much about the actual history of? That we haven't done already.
Okay, city. I need a region. Oh,
Anatolia.
Troy.
Troy. Good job. Okay.
Tari. Wait, so I'm confused. So there, I know it's called Wulusa or Wiliusa, but what's Tariusa?
Tariusha.
Yeah.
I actually don't know Tariusha. Maybe I made a mistake with something. Tarhun Tasha. That was the one we looked at. That was by Kesari. But Wilusha, this is an interesting city in and of its right. Based on real history and archaeology, not just looking at the Iliad, which is mythologized. But it was a city that combines the native Luwian culture with also Greek and Balkan cultures. And this is attested in the Iliad as well, not just in archaeology. I chose to go with the Luwian hieroglyphic for a horse because obvious reasons. And also the Luwian hieroglyphic for the sun because it's on the west coast of Anatolia, looking out onto the Aegean and the Hellespont. And the Bosphorus, excuse me. What's the difference between the Hellespont and the Bosphorus? I forget.
I think the Bosphorus is a strait, and then the Hellespont is the bridge. Yeah, so I think it's so the Hellespont would refer to the bridge between Greece and Anatolia, whereas I think the Bosphorus is actually what's in between. So it's almost like that which goes over versus the thing it goes over.
Well, Wilusha is mentioned in these sources kind of at the end of this period. They're involved in the Piamaradu affair. Or Piamaradu is this marauder who's trying to take over the city from Alexandru, who is the rightful king and a vassal of the Hittites.
What was the first name you said?
Piamaradu, which
Is
sounds
that
a lot like.
Priam?
And what does Alexandru sound like?
Alexander?
And what was Alexander another name for?
I don't know.
I think Alexander was another name for Paris.
Oh. Yeah, because Alexander means lover of people, right?
Yeah. So there is some attestation to the Trojan War having happened. These characters were real people, but they all get mixed around, kind of like with the Bible. It's like the Greek version of the Bible, basically.
Yep.
Misremembered history mixed with mythology. Well, Wilusha was an important city, but not that important. But it's kind of like the only major center in its region, and it trades with a lot of regions that, kind of not connected to the Near East otherwise. I imagine that was probably where the amber from the north entered the Near Eastern world. And amber was found as far away as Egypt. So without a doubt, it grew wealthy from trade. Where should we put Wilusha?
Maybe Lesser King.
It's kind of crowded in Lesser King. What about Vassal King?
Oh, I could see that.
It's definitely weaker than Luca. And I'm guessing probably weaker also than Carchemish. And probably also weaker than Mukish. I'm going to put it ahead of Amuru. Or basically on the same level as Amuru. It's in a less crowded area of the map. There's our tier ranking. You want to make any revisions?
One second, I'm just trying to find let's see, Troy National Park here. Oh wow.
Made a big statue of a horse out of wood. And then of course they took the big statue of the horse for the movie Troy that was made in 2004 and they put it in the site as well.
Oh, so it's kind of like selling people a false.
Yeah, the narrative of history. Of course, that's the same thing that was done in antiquity. Troy was a big tourist destination in classical antiquity. Everyone would stop by it on the way to anywhere. And of course, Alexander was one of them. All the Roman emperors, when they were touring the region, when they would stop by Troy, you know. And of course, Sparta the same way. It was the Disneyland of child torture.
Sparta. Oh, right.
Because people think, the ancients did not view the ancients before them as like, but they were as curious about the ancients before them as we are about the ancients before us. Probably more so because they didn't really have anything but history. Their lives were really boring.
Now we
All
have
you can do is get drunk, screw, and smoke your 420 and talk about history. What a boring life.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add? An addendum?
Nah, not particularly. This was fun, but I mean, it's a bit out of my wheelhouse. I'm not as good with the history. I'm more so into the religion and history. Or sorry, not history. Religion, culture, and mythology.
Do you think you'd want to do something like this again, though?
Yeah,
With a different
definitely.
period?
Yeah, and ideally, when I get a bit more sleep, I had an early appointment today, so I was starting to get a bit tired a bit ago, but it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Okay. Bye, Kinski.
Wait, well, we've got to have a proper exit.
Oh. I'll do a little dance. That's proper. No one's watching. One person's watching. Me. I'm watching. Am I? Am I watching?
I don't know, but either don't you have like one of those tracks?
I don't know. Maybe. Anyway, I think we gotta call it a night, and I need to eat my dinner.
All right. What was that?
What was what?
No, you're like,
Like that?
yeah.
It's just something.
It's like that's how you eat porridge or something.
Porridge or pasta. Or your mama.
Taj says thanks.
You're welcome, Taj.
Well, but yeah, this was fun. We'll definitely do this again soon.
Hopefully.
Dang! It's almost 3:33. I feel like we gotta wait 30 seconds. It's just too perfect. So, in the meantime.
Dana. It's a good thing to do while gaming.
Definitely.
Don't lose all your money, though.
All right.
Okay, bye.
Let's close this off. Take care.